We are going to get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our guests. This is the January 18th, 2024 school committee meeting. We will call to order at 7:01. Jimmy, would you please read the district mission statement for us, please?
Ipswich Public Schools aspires to empower all students to be global citizens who are effective communicators, analytical problem solvers, and savvy consumers of information. We propose to do this through an emphasis on communication, critical thinking, creativity, self-management, perseverance, and collaboration. Students will be active partners in authentic learning, offering voice and choice, and demonstrating competency.
Thank you. Announcements this evening. The FY25 budget presentations to the school committee will be held on Wednesday, January 31st and Thursday, February 1st. Meetings will begin at 7 p.m. and will be held in the middle school, high school ensemble room. Second announcement is there has been a recent change in the Comcast station that is broadcasting our local ICAM education channel. So the new Comcast channel to watch our school committee meetings live on Comcast is channel 22. Like it used to be channel 28. So now it's channel 22, and the Verizon channel has not changed and continues to be channel 31. That's also on our website, I noticed. Thank you to, I guess, Laura or someone who updated that. So, also the Ipswich representative to the Whittier Regional Vocational Technical School Committee term is expiring on March 31st. So anyone who is interested in serving as the Ipswich representative on the Whittier Tech School Committee should submit a letter of interest to myself, Kate Elliott, at kelliott@ipsk12.net. And we are hoping to have those letters of interest by, I believe, February 15th. And finally, there is a tri-board scheduled for February 28th, either 7 or 7:30, but I want to make sure that's on everybody's calendars. Any other announcements tonight? All right, hearing none. Special acknowledgements. Dr. Blake.
Yes, I have two this evening. The first one goes out to Tracy Wagner, our Director of Teaching and Learning, who will be defending her dissertation tomorrow morning from Northeastern University. She's been working on that here in the district for the last 2 years. Her dissertation focused on equity-minded leadership at the high school level. And then the second one is on your way in, you may have noticed the middle school art show is set up out in the Performing Arts Center lobby out there, and just some amazing work by our students and the teachers that are guiding them. So I encourage folks to take a look at that on their way out, and I think they're going to try to leave that up for a week or so. So if you're in the building and have an opportunity, please take some time and see what our middle school students are up to. So thank you.
Any other special acknowledgements tonight? All right. I actually don't have any remarks from the chair this evening. Do we have any public comments tonight? All right. Seeing none. High school student representative report. Jimmy.
Awesome. So tonight I wanted to talk about the Google form that I feel like I've talked about a million times now, but actually haven't shared any of the responses yet. So I sent everybody an email so they do have a copy of it if you want to look at any time and refer to that, just in general. But anyway, what we had talked about in our advisory council meeting was, like, we saw a lot of responses that were asking or just kind of saying they didn't like the way the schedule was set up, or that they wanted more time in between classes, longer lunch, longer this and that. And we had done some research into it, and like DESE obviously requires us to have 990 hours annually of school, so that's not going to be something that we can change, which is something that we want to share with the rest of the student body and just say, like, okay, like, we acknowledge that you would like this time, but you would have to then add time to the school day, or it's not a feasible or actually a thing that we have any control over at this point. There were also a few responses first coming from the senior class just saying, like, oh, I'm not getting senior privilege, which is allows students to leave during their like R blocks, which are like time that you could talk to teachers and, I don't know, work on homework, or during lunch. That we're just saying that, like, oh, I've had these medical absences, but I'm being denied senior privilege, and that's not the case. We just want to send a message out as well and clarify that you wouldn't get denied for that. You have to check on your grades, and there might be something else going into it, but Mr. Mitchell and Ms. Kohler are more than happy to talk to anybody that has any issues regarding that. We also talked about, there were a number of responses that wanted more sort of like student bonding. Like we do a big Spirit Week in the fall, but kind of nothing really happens. Obviously seniors have senior week and everything like that, but for the rest of the school, we wanted to maybe talk about starting some other sort of smaller events, something else that would just kind of raise morale as the end of the year kind of comes to a close. Just so, I don't know, it'd be nice to have more bonding then too. It doesn't all have to be at once, you know? Another number of responses we're talking about just like the bathrooms overall, not like, right now there are 2 restrooms for male students and then 3 for women, I believe, because one of the male ones got taken for staff because there was one of the other ones got taken away from staff, so it's been a little bit of a jumble. But anyway, students were talking about how they would like to have paper towels back and different things like that, make sure all the doors are on. So what we had talked about with Mr. Mitchell and Ms. Kohler was even there for that point. It was just saying that students are not even washing their hands at this point because of the bacteria that spreads from just the electric dryers, like whatever it is. However, students were like vandalizing the bathrooms, taking the paper towels off the walls, like smashing them. So he would like to put those back, but until students are going to make sure that they're not going to just destroy them, like it's a give and a take. Like you have to be responsible if you want them, you know what I mean? But it's a bummer because not all the bathrooms are having those issues. So for certain bathrooms to be vandalized and now nobody else has paper towels, that's a bummer, but we'll see what can be changed with that. There were also some responses regarding the DEI team, just kind of criticizing when that takes place, and that was like what I talked about a couple weeks ago, where they did like a identity series, and some students had felt like, I don't know if I really want that during my art block, or I don't know if I really want to be forced to do it. But what we were going to send out in our Instagram post is just like, if you have any concerns or want to talk about that, like the DEI team, go right to them, join a meeting, and share your concerns, because they'd be more than happy to talk about it and see where you're coming from, see what changes can be made, if any. Like, that's where to go versus just complaining, because if you actually want something to be done, you kind of have to go through the whole process. And then another thing that had come up was just talking about like what's going on in the world and how maybe some way into our curriculum, I don't know how it would work, just to have some sort of education on just like these harder conversations to be had, and how to have a productive conversation when maybe you don't agree and you agree to disagree, but you still want to have those conversations. And that way everyone can be knowledgeable of what goes on, because even though we're stuck in this Ipswich bubble, like the world is still spinning. There are things going on everywhere. And it would be nice for students to all have access to the same information and not just, I see this on social media, so that's what I'm going to go off of. And for things to be talked about in school, I think would be really productive for everyone to just hear, okay, it's not opinion-based, but it's just the facts, what's going on in our world, and maybe there's a place for students to be able to talk about how then that they feel about it or anything like that, and just learn to have productive conversations where not everyone's going to agree, but it's okay to have those conversations and address your concerns, hear other people out, and it doesn't have to be an argument. But that's basically it. There's a lot in there, and there's a ton of other responses too, and then just like last time, there's some random ones in there, and we haven't gone through and picked those out, but
Always the kids who comment on donuts.
yeah.
A lot of comments about donuts. I don't know if they,
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I have a question. So how do you get that feedback out to the,
We were
like if
gonna
you have feedback
post-
back to the student body?
We have our
How do you
Instagram
get that
account, and we
back?
were gonna
Okay.
draft that up, but then with midterms and everything, everyone was kind of like, well, I'm gonna try and add some stuff here and there, and then just the language around it, and
Yeah.
just like that. But then we started thinking like, okay, we can post this on Instagram, but how are we gonna get students to engage and actually look at this and then share this? Like, okay, look at what was talked about. So we just are gonna try and think a little bit harder about how we want to word things, how we want it to be presented, just so that way it's not just like, okay, here's a post and people scroll right past it. And also so it doesn't like cause more of like, oh my gosh, what are they talking about? Or I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
some very thoughtful responses in there that
Yeah.
I certainly appreciate, and actually one of them I'm going to talk about a little bit later.
Okay.
Yeah, I love the mid-year, I don't know, bonding. 'Cause I
Yeah,
agree with you.
I
It
think
seems
that'd
like
be
it's
really
really focused in like the beginning of the year and the end of the year.
Yeah.
So like a post midterm
Yeah.
January. Would be nice.
Another thing too was like students had said that, Spirit Week is really athletic based, but in middle school we used to do like the geography bee or there were just random things like that were not sports related. Anybody could participate, and it was just like, oh, let me just try it out. Like no pressure,
Right.
have fun, give it a try.
Trivia.
I don't know. People had fun with that.
Questions for Jimmy? Thanks for your report.
think it was great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Work.
a lot of responses too.
Some at the bottom too, Charlie had thought to take paper responses because the form didn't work. So those were a little more specific because he had written up 3 different questions and spent the time to put them all online so they're all in one place, but they're a little different.
Thanks. Alrighty, on to presentations. Tonight we have a couple of high school engineering students from the high school engineering projects team. Welcome. You can come up to, is there a microphone in there, Sasha?
Yeah.
You have to come up to this microphone, which isn't for us, it's for the people at home, so it won't feel like it's doing anything, but
Okay, just like this.
you can just maybe introduce yourselves and,
I'm Jane O'Connell, I'm a senior.
I'm Jake Petrodelis, and I'm a junior.
So we're leaders on the Ipswich High School Engineering Projects team, which is a class. It's with Mr. Gallant. I know he presented to you guys earlier this school year about our trip that we go on. So our class is a part of a 1080, which is an engineering student-based organization where they have an annual RC car race. So we spend our whole year doing the engineering behind it with building the cars, doing an engineering project, but also doing the enterprise and the whole project behind the race. So it's very inclusive. So with our trip, we have our predictions for how many people we want to travel. We had an interest survey, and so we have 32 students who are very interested in going, and then we would have 4 chaperones, including Mr. Gallant, and then 3 parent chaperones. So for the last 10 years we've gone, and last year we took 35 students and we finished 3rd overall. And I went last year and another couple other students, and so we want to take what we learned last year and then apply it to this year, and then the same ongoing as a domino effect. So we really want this to be as inclusive as possible so many students can learn. So for our fundraising, what we're asking for today is to match an IEF grant of $5,000. We've also received a $7,500 Traverso grant, and then we have a leaf raking sponsorship that we do ourselves, and we have $3,000 from that. And then we haven't received all of them totally, but we have an estimate of $2,000 from local sponsors. So in total, without the grant that we're asking for today, that's $17,500 in fundraising.
And for overall trip costs, for just the flights alone, it's $16,200, along with the hotel being $6,000, and vans for transportation while we're in Charlotte being $3,000. And we have the Whitewater Center, which is an activity that we'll kind of just get out to and have fun at, which is another $3,000. And parts for our car is $1,000. And shipping all of our materials and the stuff we've built here and our projects over to the competition is $2,000, which amounts to $31,200. And minus the fundraising cost, which was $17,500, we get down to $13,700. And this divided by the number of students able to pay, which we're saying 30, and we're estimating that 2 students will not be able to afford the trip, which that comes down to $456 per person without money from the school.
So then with the hopefully matched IEF grant that we're asking for the $5,000 from Ipswich Public Schools, that would be $22,500 in fundraising. So then when you divide that by 30, it's $290 per student, which is still a lot, and we know obviously 456 is more. But so without the match, it would cost much more than with the grant. So hopefully with the grant, it would be less of a financial burden on the Ipswich families, and that more students would be able to go. including more juniors that could go their senior year to help our team have more success in the future. Thank you. Any questions?
So you went last year, and what was was it a similar sort of funding breakdown of last year? Of what
Yes,
happened
so
last year?
last year, I think we received more money in TWIG grant this year because we have an estimated, like, a larger number of students wanting to go this year. And last year it was in Miami, so it was everything was much more expensive, like the flights and the hotel and all the activities and everything. But yeah, last year we did get the IEF grant, but matched by Ipswich Public Schools. We just didn't have to put it in front of the school committee. Just different this year. So it has been matched in the past.
Okay. But it didn't come to the school committee?
But it did go to the school committee last year.
I don't remember.
Mr. Galante, Mr. Mitchell just like approved it or something. I'm not
Okay.
sure.
Yeah, I don't remember it coming in front of the school committee. I mean, overnight field trips have to?
Like
Yeah.
the field trip got approved, but the grant wasn't.
Okay.
Didn't have to be brought in front of the school committee last year.
Yeah. So, I guess we would have to decide whether or not to approve this, but also how it would be funded, because we don't have a bucket of money sort of.
We would have to find it in the appropriated budget.
Yeah, we would have to find it in the budget. So I can weigh in that having just come from a almost 2-hour budget meeting, just before this, budgets are tight right now. We're looking at a substantial budget discussions for this coming year, so that's just something to think about. I personally, I see the merits of the trip. I think it seems like a great trip. So I don't know, I guess I'll open it up to the committee for thoughts on helping match this IEF grant to bring the cost down about $200 a student. Does that sound about right?
Roughly, yeah.
Decrease about 200 per student.
Yeah, I just have a question. I'm looking in the drive for the overnight approval, and I see the ones for 21 and 22 and 23. Have we approved, I think we've approved the Charlotte trip already.
We, yes.
Okay. And does anyone know where that or what meeting that was at?
The 7th.
To look at that application, okay.
So on that, it shows cost to school as 0 and cost to students at $300. And it seems to me over the past several years, there has never been a cost to the school for this trip.
Right.
I guess my point being, when we approve it and the budget has been done, did we just see an increase of per student expenses that was unanticipated? Or were there other factors that are making it all of a sudden you're $5,000 short?
I think we had a greater amount of students interested in going than in past.
Okay.
Okay. And those two students that aren't, I think your calculations included 32 students anticipated going and 38 students. So those other 2 students, are you rolling in their costs into everybody else?
Yeah, we just assumed that there'd be 2 students who were like obviously a viable part of the team and have been working
Yeah.
hard in the class and everything that wouldn't be able to afford either like themselves or their family to go on the trip. So obviously we still want them to be included. So yeah, we factored that in, which we estimated about 2, but we're not totally sure on those numbers yet.
Okay. Other thoughts on this?
Very much see the merits of the trip, like you said. I guess another concern I have is just precedent.
Right, so by precedent, typically we don't have students coming to ask us for money often, or, but.
Yeah, I could have sworn that the kids came last year and asked for this matching grant. That's why I asked them to come tonight, so I need to own
No, and
part of
I'm-
that.
Well, I mean,
So,
and,
And I
yeah, we
could
can
be
look.
wrong, so sounds like I might be wrong.
I'll say I'm supportive of it. I also appreciate the both of you coming to speak about it this evening as well. It's not a small amount for us, but I think the offset for those families is significant, particularly if they're students that we're going to be able to cover all of it to allow them to travel when they wouldn't otherwise. I see it both as an arrangement, both currently, but how it sets them up in future years, or if you're a senior, setting you up particularly for college, it's a significant benefit. And so I'd be supportive of funding it out of our this year's school budget.
And I think, I'll speak for Tom, I think where we are in our current budget, we can absorb this year. Next year, different story, but this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with Sasha. I think we should have a conversation as a school committee about sort of having some parameters around what sorts of things we will fund, and not that things aren't worthy of being funded, because they are, but, you know, just the trips seem to be increasing in frequency, and, you know, and I know they're all great, but at some point, we have to sort of put some parameters around what we'll be willing to fund, and just going forward. So it doesn't sort of just keep ramping up every year, you know.
Agreed.
Because, you know, next year, it might be more challenging next year. And if the numbers keep going up, then the asks are going to keep going up. And I understand why kids want to go, which is great. So I would support it too. I think I just would like to have some more conversations at our level about funding these types of requests on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, I think we need to be more planful
With
going
no
forward. The one other
parameters.
thing that I would add, especially for this program, is it's not just a one-off individual trip like some of the other ones are, but sort of standalone. This is part of a larger program throughout the year, and I think that's an important aspect, again, of why we should support it.
It also sounds like by a larger number of students going, next year's program could be stronger and benefit from the students going the previous year. So it will waterfall exactly what Jane was saying, which I think.
So 32 kids are interested in going. Do all of them need to go? Is this part of the, like, do you want this to be part of the club or the class, that everybody who's involved has to go? Or can it be, we're going to do 12 students every year?
Well,
Maybe a more limited amount of,
so a part of it is there's multiple presentations given at the event, and then at the event there's also races. So you need like the driver, the mechanics, and then like many people as like backup, and then like team leaders to help like organize everybody. So there is like a number of people who need to be there, and a lot of other people who will like put like a lot of effort in and everything, who want to be there as well. In the past, I don't know if last year was the first year, but in the past there's only been one team that goes, but we have two teams. There's two different engineering classes that want to go, that are going. So we have two teams competing, so it's double the amount like required per team.
yeah. I'm just wondering if the kids that want to go would be great. But I'm just wondering if that's like that they don't need to go. Is that helpful to, to cut down some of the people that are attending?
Right.
I think that would be something, and have a visual, I don't know, something on a camera or whatever, so they can feel like they're there, but there's not the cost associated with it. I don't know.
But I think I understand correctly, it's a competition.
Yes.
Yeah, so the members of the team are competing.
Right.
Yeah. Everyone has a job on the team.
Oh, all 32 would have a job?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I understand.
Yeah, I'm supportive. I think these experiential things are wonderful. Take what you learn in classrooms and bring it outside. So I'm totally supportive. I mean, if we think we can find the money, I think we can also just say with the caveat that this may not be something we can do in subsequent years. But I think for the purpose now, I'd be supportive of it.
Anyone else?
Motion to support the engineering team's trip to Charlotte with $5,000.
Second?
All right. Moved by Jen, second by Matt. Any further discussion on this? Okay, all in favor? All right, unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good
night.
night.
As a general comment, I took some notes here just to to continue the conversation at another date, but I think we do need to look at the parameters around overnight trips in terms of how many kids are going, having both minimums and perhaps maximums, because I wonder if some trips should run if it's only a few kids, if we booked it for many, and what the costs are associated with that, but also the fundraising parameters, like where's, this is a $30,000 trip, round numbers, right? The kids have raised 22 of it in, outside funds, fundraising from the local community or school budget. And then they have the balance. So, are there percentages that we should consider in the future? So that's for a conversation for another day. I think part of it is something that the FEFI's working group is or will be looking at, but I think it'll carry over to other programs, because the engineering program isn't the only program that we do this with. We look at we look at the England trip that the music department does. We look at the robotics team, which is completely separate, that does overnight field trips. And we have a number of different groups that have grown accustomed to doing these overnight trips, and the costs add up for somebody.
I also think potentially we should see a little bit more detail when the overnight field trip request is coming. So right now, it just shows cost to school and cost to student, and then it says availability for scholarship, and then they say the funding source. I just think they missed it. This year, I just don't think they budgeted well, and I think they're realizing, because that was based on 30 students at $400 per student, and there's only 2 extra students coming. So I think they just didn't budget it very well.
I have that in my note as well.
Sorry to
Ask
say
Bill
it
about.
publicly.
No, I just ask about the original grant application. I think we have to look at those in general when they come in, as far as the.
Yeah, and then know if they're going to come
Yeah.
back.
Perhaps they could do it every other year, because then, you can do it as a freshman and you do it as a junior, or you do it as a sophomore to senior. So like, if you do it
Well, and that's,
every other year,
yeah.
then they'll be able to have the opportunity to do it twice.
Right.
So,
And that's the model that the England trip
oh, yeah.
has. So every student that participates in the band, orchestra, or choral program here gets to go to England once during their 4 years of high school.
Yeah.
Depends on.
My only concern with that was she brought up the idea of this sort of institutional knowledge of this, and that it builds. So I don't know if you have a heavy junior, senior contingent in there every other year, you might not be able to build that.
I'd like where you were going with that, Dr. Blake, too, because as we're getting this request to come from the appropriated budget, I'm just thinking about discussions we've had at FEFI's, and I'm like, is this like another circumstance that we need to consider as we continue to dive into that?
Yep.
Great.
Put it on the agenda for.
All right, up next, we have a potential vote on borings at 25 Green Street at the Town Hall. I don't see Vicki Hallman here, but we had a presentation on this a couple of weeks ago.
Yep. So, I did not make Vicki come back. Vicki was here, did the presentation. We had the slide deck that she shared. There was a question about the borings and if concerns about what we potentially would find. So Vicki took that to town council. Town council then provided a written answer that's in your packets this evening. And I think from the last meeting, that was the only outstanding issue, if I recall correctly. So based on this new information, I would ask that the school committee discuss and potentially vote on allowing this. Unless there's other questions that come up as a result of this.
And so my opinion is, I think we got the answers that I requested or that we requested, specifically the purpose of the borings is to look at sort of structural integrity of the soils and not looking for contamination or environmental matters. The, town council did opine that given the location being close to the river, it's unlikely that we would find some oils or something that were not already demonstrating themselves kind of closer to the water. The liability is not the school's liability in the event that something were discovered. It's a town-owned site, and the town at large would own that liability. But again, his feelings is that it's a relatively low risk in opening that can of worms. So based on that, the fact that we're not giving up control of the site, that's really an exploratory piece. I think we should allow the testing. I think we should be interested to see what comes back, because that further tells us a little bit more about the site. And I would make a motion to support authorizing borings at the town hall site for purposes of exploring the sewer treatment, or I guess sewer pump location.
Second.
All right. Motion by Jeff, second by Jenny. Any further discussion on this or questions?
Having seen all the septic trucks this past weekend going back and forth, I think that this is something we need to get on.
Yeah, I know.
a little
Those pictures
scary.
of that flooding were pretty crazy at the wharf. Okay. All right. All in favor? I guess we have a motion and a second. All in favor? All right. Unanimous, 7-0. Thank you. Will you let her know?
Yes, I will. She may even be watching, who knows?
She may be. All right, so again, ahead of schedule. Discussion and potential vote on opening the school choice program for the 2024-2025 school year is up next.
Yep. So I'll kick off the conversation and then leave it to the school committee. But historically, the statute provides that individual school districts can opt in or out of the school choice program for any particular year. If we take a vote each year to do so. If we open and decide to participate in the school choice program, then we ask the administrators where they would like to have slots open for students to potentially apply and/or enroll for those choice slot seats. The district receives $5,000 for each choice student and $7,500 for any student on an IEP. It's called an increment, a special education increment. Historically, when I think just a long history perspective, years ago when Ipswich Middle High School was a brand new building, and in the years since then, we had a high number of students in the school choice program at all different levels, mainly the middle and high school. Over the years now that the high school has gotten older, the other districts around us that we would normally have kids from have built new schools over the years. They've built new fields, et cetera. At one point, we were the only turf field in the area, as one selling point. So we had high numbers of school choice students. In more recent years, we've seen that dwindle, and we've, over the last 4 or 5 years, every year we've had conversations at the school committee about whether or not we wanted to continue participating, and again, it's an annual decision, and B, if we did, what grade levels would we want to open seats in? Part of that conversation is where are we seeing the interest, because people start calling around this time of year to ask if we're opening choice seats. Not all people who apply for choice end up coming here. I think a lot of parents cast a wide net If they're looking to change placements, you know, whether it be private school or another public school for whatever reason the family may have. Typically, we see the choice requests more so at the middle and high school than we do the elementary school level. So the first question this evening is, and part of the reasoning why we have the discussion every year about if we want to open up seats or not, and at what levels, is class sizes, things like, are we trying to right-size budgets and teaching loads, et cetera? So there's a lot of different factors that are considered in there. And then in going through all that, the administrators will make recommendations as to whether or not they feel they can take and want to open up school choice seats. So that information, I think, is in your packet this evening. So the vote that I would really like tonight is whether or not to participate, and then the second vote would be to open the seats as recommended by the administrators, and that would be essentially for seats in at the elementary level versus the middle and high school level. Both the middle school and high school principal did not express interest in opening seats up for school choice this year, or for this next year, I should say.
And historically, we have participated in the school choice program for years, decades?
Yes, yep.
We typically do, but we don't need to.
Correct. And that's why it comes to the school committee every year for a vote. You know, we've had conversations over the years, the 7 years that I'm here. We've had conversations with school committees that some were very interested in school choice, and others that in some of our tight budget years wanted to try to right-size the district. You know, we had a couple years ago when we were looking at the middle school and enrollment numbers, and we were able to not open seats and make some adjustments to class sizes and the number of teachers that we had, number of classes, I should say, not teachers. So it is a decision every year.
So, is the 5,000 and 7,500 on top of any disbursement from the town from whence they came, or is that?
That is the disbursement.
That
from
is,
the town.
so it costs the district money for choice?
Yes.
Because our cost per pupil is higher than that, right?
Feel free to weigh in.
Well, I'm not honestly sure if so we don't record it as an expense. Effectively, school choice is really intended to fill empty seats, not sort of empty rooms. So the purpose, legislatively, is not to assume cost. Like, these would be the cost of running this classroom, whether there's 18 kids or 19 kids in it. So it really shouldn't be an extraordinary driver of costs. It should be to help fill empty seats, and as Dr. Blake said, to sort of right-size class size or right-size department size and that. So it's not really any sort of extraordinary expense.
It's an expense for the sending district is
Sure.
I think what was.
And we send,
US.
I have the chart up, we send 15 students out in school choice as well.
So the grade 2 in Winthrop, my daughter's in grade 2, they had to bring up a first grade teacher to be in second grade. But there's 5 spots open?
It would be for next year.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
For next year,
spots
okay.
for next
First
year.
grade class is smaller.
That makes more sense.
Oh, we're talking about the current
Right.
first grade
First graders,
getting
huh?
these spots next year.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's good point, though.
Is there something missing from the Doyon? It says
Yeah. I
Grade
asked you
4,
about
grade
that.
5, but it
Joanne
doesn't say
have
how
any
many
numbers.
spots.
They didn't, Peter didn't specify the number of spots that he wanted, but he said that those were the 2 smallest grades and that he would be willing to
that if we do vote to open the choice program and subsequently vote again, the second vote would need to be for a specific number of seats. Right? Should be.
Would.
Yeah.
Would be.
Last year, the grades that they opened at Doyon, it was 5 spots per grade. And 5 spots per grade for the open grades at Woodward as well.
So I don't know if we should parse this out and first talk about open it, yes or no, and then get into the details. But I mean, another piece of it that's at the bottom of the document in your folder is sort of the history of, or short history of the stats in terms of numbers of open seats, numbers of applications we got for those open seats, and then number of students ultimately enrolled. So at least from this current school year, and I believe in years past,
This has been the trend.
we often, or we never fill the seats. We could, but typically there are, I don't know, far fewer, but there are fewer applications than seats and even fewer enroll. So just because we open seats doesn't necessarily mean
Going to fill them, right.
Well, if the school thinks that they could, use 5 more children in second grade for next year, why wouldn't we? What would be the downside of, why would we say no to that? I guess is wondering.
I think just maintaining the right sizing of the classes, and I think it's, while it would benefit the district a little bit financially, the impact on the classroom may be different.
Is there like, in the chart that I'm looking at, it says that there are 4 total enrolled, 1 at the middle school, 3 at the middle school, and then 1 at Doyon. So are those 2 students in the same grade? Is that really like making a huge impact overall? Like on the grade or the class size or the building? Like, because to me, it only looks like 2 students. But I guess if you're doing this every year and it's 2 more.
it shouldn't be, because in theory, the recommendations we're getting from administrators, they wouldn't be recommending
Something that,
seats in,
Yeah.
Elementary classrooms that currently have 23 kids,
Yeah.
I'm guessing.
Right.
They'd be recommending,
It's also the dynamics of the class as well. So it's not necessarily numbers of students, but the makeup of that class.
yeah.
Would, and forgive me, because I'm not very up to date on this, but if you choice in elementary school, do you have to reapply each year, or does that guarantee you the right to go all the way through?
You're in.
You're in. Yep.
And we would get that $5,000 every year,
Every year, okay.
or $7,500.
I looked at the balance, so our choice balance is $1.728 million now. So certainly after our stabilization fund, it's our most healthy account that we have. So it is a good source of, I think can be used for almost any purpose generally within the school that enriches or enhances education for, or maybe those are not the right words, but supports education for students, whether those are the incoming students or existing Ipswich students. And I'm sure that the district and the administrators have made recommendations where they're not looking to cut a section, or something, and they're not. So that we're not, again, to Tom's point, we're not keeping a classroom open just to support additional students. So I'm inclined to say that Ipswich should again enroll or open up choice for students. I would like to see, maybe not this cycle, but the middle school and high school administrators think a little bit more about why we're not doing that. I mean, a couple of years ago, it looked like we opened up 8 slots in the middle school and 25 in the high school, and then last year we went to 0. And I thought that was maybe just an anomaly because we were trying to get a sense of that student population and some other reasons, but now 2 years is it becoming a trend. So I think that's something that we should look at and see if there are missed opportunities in those 2 school buildings as well.
So let's just take the first issue first, which is, how do we feel about opening the school choice program for the upcoming school year? Is there anyone sort of not interested or cautious about opening the school choice program?
I'm in support of opening the,
Maybe we could take that vote first. I wrote a motion. Wrote a motion. All right, so move to approve the move to open the school choice program for the 2024-2025 school year.
Second?
Moved by Kate, second by Jeff. Any other discussion on opening the program? All right, all in favor? All right, so it's unanimous to open the school choice program. Thank you. Now we have to discuss, we don't have to take a vote tonight on slots. I think we might be preferred to, so we could open it sooner rather than later.
What do we do with,
We have been getting phone calls and,
what do we do for Doyon, since they haven't,
well, that's what I'm not sure about.
we have to come back to that, or?
Do we have class sizes in those?
I don't have them.
Three
Wait a
and
minute.
4.
I wonder if the intent was to open up 5 in each again, where that was what was done last year, and that would be the last year's 3rd and 4th grade, and those were 5.
Could we vote on the other schools where we do have specific recommendations, so at least they can proceed and communicate to parents that have expressed interest and hold just Doyon for a future meeting? There be any issue there?
Laura's the one who manages the program, so I'm not. I'm sorry, I was reading numbers.
I was just suggesting perhaps we could vote on Winthrop Middle School and High School, since we do have those recommendations, and hold the vote on Doyon for a future meeting. That way at least Winthrop Middle School, High School can proceed with the procedural steps notifying families now, rather than waiting another couple weeks.
I would say if we could wait, if we could do the vote by the end of February, we still have plenty of time. So we usually do, this is a lottery system, so our first lottery is typically in March. And then our second lottery is in June.
Okay, so we have time.
Lottery, so I just accept applications until March for lottery first. There's plenty of time.
Okay.
Peter did say in his email that grade 5 was his smallest grade with 48 students, and grade 4 has 50.
With obviously 3 sections in each. I can't do that math, 17. So 16, 17 students. So who remembers our recommendations for class sizes for elementary schools?
That's right.
20?
It's, yeah, well, depending on the grade, I think it's up to 20, 4th and 5th grade is a little bit more, 20, 22,
So we could,
so, yeah.
according to, so we sort of have standards for
Yep.
class sizes per grade. So if it's 22, we could theoretically accept up to 5 students in those 4th and 5th grades and still stay within our sort of recommended class sizes. And again, the chances of getting 5 students is,
Just since it's in front of us, I would, I would recommend that we would vote to accept 5 students at Winthrop grade 2, 5 students at Winthrop grade 3, up to 5 students at Doyon grade 4, and up to 5 students at Doyon grade 5, and ask Peter Holtz if that's not the intent, to come back and ask us to reconsider that in our next meeting. Otherwise, we're done.
Well,
What's that motion going to look like?
I think I made it.
that one.
yeah. I think you,
you
Jeff, you
captured
said
it.
Winthrop grade 3. I think you meant to say grade 4.
Yes, grades,
I follow you
that was a
though,
motion,
like
I think.
up to 5 students, Doyon grade 4, up to 5 students, Doyon, grade 5. If Peter needs to change that, can he? Like, say, oh no, I only want
To come back to us
You'd have to
and
come
ask us
back
to,
and
oh,
we'd
you,
have
you
to-
opened up more than I was hoping, would you reconsider that?
And that throws a,
Yeah, I would say,
yeah, we'd be well within the limits of our class size recommendations if we did 5 students, if we recommended opening 5 slots in each of the 4 grades outlined. Grade 2 at Winthrop, grade 4 at Winthrop, grade 4 at Doyon, and grade 5 at Doyon. Even if on the off chance we got 5 students in all of those grades, we'd still be at 22 students a classroom. Each school or each grade?
School and then the grade.
Multiple votes.
You could do it differently, but
That's fine.
Happy to try.
Well, do we just, is there any more discussion about middle school, high school? I mean, my instinct is to take the recommendation of the administrators.
I'd like it to be a bigger discussion in the future, just because it is flexible, particularly in the high school, as to where those students, because they're not taking necessarily grade level classes all the way across. So just as, again, I don't think it should cost the district money to have those students here, but if there's an opportunity, I just like to make sure that we're looking at it.
There's always the potential for the students to cost the district money, which is part of the challenge, is we don't know until they get here.
for the same reasons, I feel like there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just the math. I would suggest we don't vote on Doyon until we hear back specifically the numbers that they recommend, and perhaps with some reasoning behind it, rather than suggesting 5 at each grade.
I'm fine, I mean, I'm comfortable with the 5, but I'll see what other people think. Any left?
If we can just get it off our agenda, I think we should just
Yeah,
do it.
I think, I agree with Jeff. We have a busy time period coming up. I think if, get back to that,
If we vote
Item
on
on the
up to
agenda.
5, he has to come back if he,
It's always going to be up to 5. I mean, if you write 5, it's always going to be up to 5, because there might only be one applicant.
but if Peter wanted 3,
Then he should have said, I know,
Right.
he submitted this form. but he
well, and
didn't
if we
say,
look,
so.
if we look at last year's stats, we opened seats at, at these particular grade levels, and we didn't fill them. So I have no reason to
Come close to
believe
filling
that,
them.
I'm sorry?
We didn't come close to
No,
filling them. We
no.
filled no
So I have
seats. We're in grade
no reason
4.
to believe that we're going to have that issue this year. Not any different.
Okay, well, let's start with Winthrop, because we seem comfortable with that one.
I would move to open up 5 choice seat at Winthrop grade 2 for the 2024-2025 school year.
Second.
Motion by Jeff, second by Sasha. Further discussion? Should we wait for Jenny? I don't know where she left. Keep moving? Okay. All in favor? 6-0.
I would make a motion to approve 5 slots at Winthrop grade 4 for the 2024-2025 school year.
Second.
Motion by Jeff, second by someone over there. Jen?
Someone
Jen.
over there.
stereo.
Further
A
discussion?
whisper from that side of the room.
On this? The fan's loud back here. Okay, further discussion on this? All in favor? And 6.
I'll go out of order in case we get Jenny back. I would move not to open choice seats at the middle school or high school at any grade level during the 2024-2025 school year.
Second.
Motion by Jeff, second by Sasha. Further discussion on this one? Okay, all in favor? 6-0. Talk slow, because Jenny's coming back.
Quick question, can the motion be a maximum, to your point, a maximum of 5 seats, but it would allow us to actually open 3? We'd have to, the motion would have to be for the specific number?
If you're doing for Doyen, because it's the same grade 4 for Winthrop and grade 4 for Doyen, typically it's a blind application and they don't specify what elementary school they're going to, so technically we could just assign 5 of the students to go to Winthrop and then 5 more, 3, they would go to the other. Really just like a collective pool of grade 4 applicants, 10 spots, because we're not letting them choose it. They don't get to choose their own.
Oh, Laura, you need
Laura
a
needs a
microphone.
microphone.
That was kind of just,
That's valuable stuff.
I think that was just, do you want to repeat? Or I think that was just like an internal logistical discussion of how we vote.
Or how we
So
vote,
nothing was missed at home, I don't think. That needs,
Okay, so let's keep it as we, then I'm fine with the way we did.
okay.
Keep going.
So I make a
Proceed as we
motion
would.
Do you want to fill Jenny in? Just, we had a little
So-
discussion
We're
on.
voting without you.
We voted without you, but, sorry.
Fine.
So now we're on to Doyen, and
So I move to open 5 choice spots at Doyon in the 4th grade for the 2024-2025 school year.
Second?
moved by Jeff, second by Matt. Further discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous.
And I make a motion to open 5 choice seats in the grade, in the 5th grade at Doyon for the 2024-2025 school year.
Second.
Motion by Jeff, second by Matt. Further discussion? All in favor? Okay. Thank you.
And the understanding being that if Principal Holtz has an issue with that, then he may come back and ask us to reduce that number.
Yep.
Great. Thank you. Okay, school committee goals mid-year review. We always just sort of aim to do this sometime in January, midway through the school year. We have our goals, our school committee goals in the folder. Can't find, so I would like to just sort of walk through them. It's 8D in your folder, I believe. So just sort of walk through our 2023, 2024 goals, see how we're doing, if we're on track, if anything needs to be sort of refocused on moving forward into the second half of the school year. So we can take, we created our goals in buckets. So, I'm happy to walk through the communications goals, or if someone from the communications subcommittee wants to walk through them and sort of report on how you think we're doing on our goals.
Yep, I'm happy to take that. We actually talked about it at our last meeting, so we feel like we are hitting our goals so far. We're pleased with the frequency, length, and content of the newsletters. Social media accounts are growing in followers. There's been some work about the clarification of public comment. We didn't actually specifically talk about the DEI piece of that, but I think that as we're thinking about more community outreach, visiting Dinner Bell, that may play into that goal. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything there.
Okay. Do we have, excuse me, any feedback on the monthly the change of the cadence to monthly newsletters from anyone? Or is there a way to, I know we had talked about maybe looking at open rates for the
We did.
newsletters compared to, I don't know, last year or the year before.
Did, but
We didn't, okay.
We didn't do the
We can
comparison,
get
but
it.
we did do, I did ask about the open rates, and give me a second. I want to say,
they were very high,
They were,
higher
yeah.
than what we're sending out. So kind of wanted to dig into,
Or higher, what do you mean?
our distribution list is smaller than our open rates, so I just want to kind of pick apart those
Oh, the
numbers
open
and
rate's
make
not
sure.
like a percentage, it's like a.
Yeah, it's a number. It was like in the 2000s,
Yeah,
which,
the email went out to about 2,240 people. So some people may have opened it more than once, is what Keith responded, because I asked that question.
yeah.
Because we send the newsletter as a link through Blackboard versus some other functionalities, we're little limited on specific metrics. But I'd guess 95% of the people are reading it.
Argue with that, that's pretty good.
We should all be in social marketing or something.
Go school committee.
To go tell Jess that. Great. Yeah, and in terms of outreach, I know you had talked about Dinner Bell. I don't know if there's an update.
So I'm reaching out to try to get a couple of dates for the springtime. So that's Monday evening commitment, and then try to get those on a date that would work for the majority of our committee members.
Okay. And I know the other thing your subcommittee discussed was Council on Aging. I did reach out to them and heard back from them about like sort of a community service project, which she was going to look into. But the other thing I offered her was a coffee with the school committee. And so she's going to look into some community service options for the spring, but she said they would love to have a coffee with, maybe not all the school committee, but sort of as many people as we can get. So I heard back from her, so she wanted to know some dates, and I just bounced it back and said, would mornings, afternoons, or evenings be better? And she emailed me back, I think just today, with like 3 or 4 dates in March, like later in March. I think it was Mondays and a couple of Mondays and a couple of Fridays at like 11 a.m. or 1 p.m. So I was hoping, I told her we'd aim to get 3 school committee members there with no real agenda, just sort of chat with people and tell them what we're working on, see if they have questions, and just sort of like a social hour. So I will circulate the dates and try to get a date locked in. But
Wonderful.
I think it'll be good. Yeah, and March is great. I said we can't do the first week in March, but second, third, and fourth week, so we'll nail a date down on that. Great. All right, facilities goals.
The focus for the facility goals was really 2 main areas: school building project and safety security updates. We all know where we're with the school building, and so our focus will shift for that with the SOI submission. The first part of the year was really focused on the safety security updates, coming back from the audit, implementation of those over the summer, and then early fall. I feel like we did a good job of making our way through the punch list, including items that were more expensive, not just sort of the easy ones to get through. We haven't really gotten too much into the school building, so that'll be the focus for our second half of the year.
All right, so budget goals, we're pretty early in the budget season, so our major goal is obviously to pass the budget for fiscal year '25 at town meeting in May. So we're sort of well underway with that. We've had meetings at a good cadence, and I think we've had some really good discussions. I think we've all learned a lot at the budget subcommittee meetings, because there's a lot to learn, and many of us are new, so we did, with Tom's help, create a budget schedule, and we've had regular chairs calls, so I've been able to, I think, have pretty good communication with other chairs about lining up meetings and coordinating and organizing tri-boards and the like. So the third bullet is exploring state, federal, and private grant opportunities to increase funding for critical projects. We have not pursued that. So I'm guessing that would probably be towards the tail end of the budget season as something to look into. Things are really going fast and furious right now with budget, but that's still something that we hope to work on. remainder of the school year. And then the last one is creating a long-term budget strategy for the district by March 4th. You know, talking about things like extending, you know, projection of override funds, forecasting long-term capital expenditures, that kind of thing. So we haven't spent a lot of time on that. I mean, we always, part of the budget process is always working with the budget calculator, but I think we could put a little more effort into that sort of longer range planning as well. Anything to weigh in on, Sasha or Jen?
The one other thing I would add is we were really intentional about adding additional time for review with town boards as well as just the community as a whole, and we built in extra days for that. It's upcoming, but I think that was a nice addition this year. I'm hopeful that'll be fruitful and
Yeah.
positively received by the town.
Yeah, we put a lot of thought into timing things out. I mean, it's tricky because you're coordinating with other boards. You want to have enough time for us to review the budget. You want to have enough time for the public to absorb it. So it's tricky to meet all the timelines. But Tom helped us, and I think we started a little earlier this year. So
We did, on our side, yeah.
yeah. So I think the only crunch time for us will be getting the budget and then turning around and having presentations, you know, the next night. But then we essentially have all of February to really begin. So, all right, FEFI policy review. Gosh, we have a lot of goals. FEFI policy review, we do. FEFI policy review.
Yeah, we've spent probably a good portion of this year trying to get our arms around sort of the history of the whole grant proposals and what the school committee's done in the past, and in an attempt to try and understand how, if at all, we might change it going forward. And I think that's a longer conversation perhaps than we had known in the beginning, or maybe not, I don't know. So then we've kind of paused a little bit on that. We got some actionable items, including the last bullet point there for the reporting out. Some good work by Jeff. I think we have something that's really workable and usable, that's and also simplified, that we think recipients will not feel that this is a gigantic burden and thus they won't do it. Usage of previously returned funds, those are some of the things that are kind of, I think, next on our list of things that we kind of have to tackle. We talked last time about the idea of, you know, what happens if something comes to us that is not approved by the paying grant committee, but we like it, what do we do? So we're working towards some of those bigger ones, but I think those are much deeper conversations.
Yeah. Yep. And are you also thinking about, so the standardized approach for reporting out, have you thought about who's going to be responsible for making sure that happens?
Yes, although we've thought about it.
Right, I mean, yeah, I just
Yeah,
think
there
that
was some
there needs
discussion.
to be like a close the loop on the year.
Right, from the FEFIs, that maybe that they would be willing to put money towards it, but then there was a discomfort with that. We don't really know who would be responsible for it or how much work it would actually be. So I'm not sure we've solved that problem yet, but it's certainly on our minds, because we want to make sure that having done this, then we actually get the feedback.
Right, because I think there has been a form, but whether or not it gets filled out
Right.
by people is the question, so. But yeah, simplifying it will be
We've
great.
made some changes to that form to simplify things in hopes that it'll be easier for folks to fill out and complete.
Would it be a requirement?
Yeah, we figured it would be sort of front-loaded.
I think it's part of the, I mean, it's part of the expectation, but again, if,
Enforced, right.
yeah,
I
if
see
it's
what
not
you mean, yeah.
enforced. And we're not trying to enforce it to make it more work for them, but to Nat Pulsifer's
Right.
frequent comments, you know, we need to
Right.
record, you know, how it's affecting students, and then in turn be able to turn that around to the community to advertise how we're using these funds. All right, last bucket is policy.
Right.
You guys get like the gold star of the goals.
Be very proud
Pushes us
of
hard.
our subcommittee.
Taskmaster.
I'm like type A, but everybody's done a ton of homework, like ahead of the meetings. Then we actually, last meeting was our best yet. And
Know about her.
and then, everybody here also reviewing everything and asking really good questions. We had a lot of extra work this year to do, but I think we are still on track. We're putting in the work to stay on track to complete this year as we set out to do.
And uploading, I don't know if that's the right word, but getting our policy manual on
Yes.
the MASC website
Thank you
was
to
another
Laura
big
for that.
accomplishment. All right. Okay. Thanks. I think we're plugging away. Next up is Dr. Blake's superintendent goals, mid-year review.
Yep. So my first goal was around the curriculum. As you know, we have the comprehensive health and PE curriculum that the standards just came out this year, so my goal is around that. I continue to meet regularly with the Compass Committee as a whole, and then the individual curriculum areas. As of now, we have one document that we've pulled together that everyone's working from and identifying what's taught at each grade level or grade span. The next steps are to finish that piece and then begin to identify the gaps in our curriculum going forward. Some members of the group have already started to look at how they can bring over their units of study from our previous documents and incorporate them into what will become the new curriculum document template, if you will. So we have, it's essentially an enormous spreadsheet that has each of the standards listed out, what grades those standards are taught at, by whom, because it could be the health teacher, it could be the PE teacher, it could be the school counselors. So who teaches that? And then the other columns will be for what the actual units are that are being done, and we can tie UBD, Universe by Design, our curriculum units directly to that standards, that Excel spreadsheet, so that all teachers have access to it. So that if it's all linked for a new teacher to come in, they can see what the expectations are and what lessons are built in there. And so that's not all going to be completed this year. It's not supposed to be. This year was to unpack all of the standards, get everything aligned, see what's being taught where, and then identify the gaps in our curriculum, so then we can start moving forward next year with identifying, okay, how do we fill in these gaps? What do we need in terms of different lessons? What do we need in terms of different curriculum? It could, not saying it will, but it could require different staffing patterns, potentially, if we get it all unpacked and realize that, hey, we don't have enough health, for example, or maybe we have, I don't think we'll ever have enough PE, but, so we'll, begin to see what it is we need to do in order to meet the standards and what it's going to take to get us there. So that's all part of the work this year. I anticipate that we'll be on target for that by the end of the year. Maintenance and operations was to integrate the, what did I do here? Integrate the new administrators into the district. I've provided them with the mentors as required by DESE. We reorganized some of the admin meeting time to spend with either just the principals or just the assistant principals, so that we have time to talk about different issues. Everyone's utilizing the TeachPoint system to document their observations. We're beginning to schedule the optic calibration exercises and classroom walkthroughs. the new administrators are all supported by Tracy, Bev, and I, in addition to the other administrators in the district. It's interesting to hear their perspectives at our leadership team meetings from where different districts that they've come from and their experiences, in terms of what their job responsibilities were in previous positions, and the number of people that they were responsible for, and the class sizes, and what their teacher expectations were. So it's provided some really rich conversations in our admin meetings over time. Feedback that I've heard from staff members in the community has been very positive on all of the new administrators. The fiscal systems, again, tied to the school committee goal, we developed the budget calendar. We did start earlier this year to make things happen and meet all the deadlines and provide the additional time that was requested. We're in the process of putting the budget together. We have a good handle on the state and federal funding that's available to us. Administrators initially developed level service budgets as they were asked to. We're finding that we're going to have to make some adjustments to those budgets. Some of the costs that we're anticipating moving forward are going to make, are having us take a much closer look at the budgets. And so we have them all put together. Last night I sent an email out to the administrators just saying, hey folks, we've got to sharpen our pencils here before I can present anything to school committee or anyone else for that matter. And so we're meeting tomorrow, and then we'll meet again next Tuesday to make adjustments to get us to what I think will be a more reasonable number. We're on target as far as the goal itself goes, and we'll be presenting that budget in 2 weeks to the school committee. Family and community engagement, the goal was around improving ongoing communication with the educational community around important issues. I continue my weekly updates. This past weekend was the first time this year that I didn't get one out. I've had numerous meetings with parents expressing a variety of concerns since the school year began. I've addressed all of those concerns with folks, either directly with the parents or the staff members that were involved. The Ipswich Athletic Advisory Committees met several times this year as well. Although we weren't invited into the MSBA process, I immediately communicated that out to the community, and we'll continue to keep them appraised of our next steps as we collectively move forward in that process. The fourth goal then, or technically I guess the fifth goal, was around cultural proficiency, and that's tied to the work around diversity, equity, and inclusion that's going on in the district. I continue to participate in each of the DEI district meetings, and I support the schools in their efforts to move No Place for Hate forward in each individual school. I attended some of the high school meetings as well as the cultural fair, and I reported out on that, I think, a couple of school committees meetings ago. I continue to participate in the Mass Ready work, race equity, diversity, and inclusion work. I'm actually presenting a problem of practice to the group next week, and it's focusing on, to your earlier point, Jimmy, how to have difficult conversations with students. Not specifically race-related, but any tough conversation, and how do we go about that in a safe environment that's safe for not only the students to express interest and concern, but also the staff members? Because a lot of the staff feel uncomfortable having those conversations, and so how do we move beyond that? Because certainly, you know, as Jimmy pointed out, the kids are asking for it. They want a place to be able to talk about it, and a current events class shouldn't be the only place that it's allowed to be discussed or can be discussed. And so we're trying to, you know, one of my problem practices, okay, so how do we get there? How do we get beyond that? The DEI work is also frequently discussed in our admin team meetings, as well as our English learner services. This year, we've worked to improve our translation services. That's been a weaker spot, I should say. Not a weak spot, but a weaker spot in terms of translating all of our forms, being able to translate, have translation services for conversations with parents, and utilizing different mechanisms so that we're able to better communicate with some of our families that are other language speakers. We've also, you know, looked to improve our enrollment process for all of our students, but in a lot of ways, a lot of it is tied to our English language learner families, and some of the documentation that we typically would have as American-born citizens that they may not have from other countries. So we're working through those issues. Overall, I think the year's been going okay. You know, I talk with my colleagues regularly, and you know that we all express the same sentiment that this job has changed drastically since COVID in any number of ways, especially the demands on time. Looking back at the goals, I think that, you know, I anticipate that they'll all be completed successfully, you know, by year end, and that the system will be in a better place as a result.
Thank you. A quick question, and maybe I missed it. Up in the management and operations goal?
Yep.
One of the products listed for that is to ensure parity and collaboration between the elementary schools in terms of Twig and Payne grant program. So I just didn't hear any mention of that. Maybe, I don't know how that's.
Yeah, I think that, you know, I didn't look specifically at the numbers of grants from each school, so I don't have that. But certainly it's part of the conversation that we have at the admin level. You know, it really in part has to do with you know, what's going on in each building and who's interested. Guys freezing to death over there?
Freezing, yeah.
It is cold. Is that blowing cold air too?
Flag
Is it?
above her is,
Oh, my gosh.
But it's cold air.
Oh, yeah.
Scoot your tables in and
Move your table in, and get out of in front of it.
you're gonna freeze. So I was just like, it's
Okay,
fine.
all right, rolling.
My jacket?
I got it. Oh, waiting till it gets to that point, yeah.
Blankets out. We'll be good. They're on their way. Just kidding.
Other questions, or any questions for Dr. Blake? Not a one. Okay, great. Thank you very much. All right, so next up on our agenda is a conversation about the MSBA, future of the elementary school building project discussion. So a couple weeks ago at our meeting, I had expressed an interest in sort of starting to have a bit more open conversations about, you know, where everybody feels like they are and they're thinking about a solution for an elementary school building project. Obviously, our SOI was not accepted this year, so I think we have some discussions around that. I did, just in effort to sort of keep us moving along and frame the discussion, I had a few questions that I thought we could just sort of walk through. And so the first, maybe an easy one, but one of the first ones is, well, I'll read through them all and then we can just sort of walk through them. But should we resubmit an SOI this year is just sort of a good place to start. And the second question is, what, if anything, should be different this time if we do resubmit? So that could be something like perhaps the priority school would shift, or on the SOI application, there's about 8 or 9 priority boxes that you have to check off. So I believe in the last year, we checked off severe overcrowding and something about the building's obsolete and doesn't meet educational needs. So those were sort of the two priorities we picked off last year. But there's many others. So that could be something else we decide to pick a different or add a different priority to our SOI this year. Next question is, again, if the answer to number 1 is yes, we do want to resubmit, who will work on the SOIs? And I believe facilities at their subcommittee set up a bit of a timeline to sort of get us there, because yes, the deadline's not till April 1st, but we're deep in budget season. There are votes that need to be taken, so I would like to walk through that timeline when we get there. And then finally, just sort of have a really honest discussion with each other in terms of where we stand in terms of, again, a solution. It doesn't need to be your final answer. I think we're all going to evolve through this process, but I would like to just hear people's individual thoughts on what they feel like is the best path forward given all of the data we have. And we did, thanks again to Diana, our data master, for pulling a bunch of, basically all the sources of data that we've gathered so far into a nice folder with subfolders. But a lot of sort of things like the listening session reports, the statement that the IEA made, all kinds of stuff. There's just lots of stuff in there. So the SOIs are in there. So I'd like to have a discussion on that. So maybe just start with, should we resubmit an SOI this year?
I can start, because we talked about this in the facilities subcommittee, and then Jen, Dan, I'll ask you guys to also fill in along the way. So in terms of the should we discussed we absolutely should proceed. The need has been there for the schools. It's not like they've gotten better since we heard that we weren't accepted. So the need hasn't changed. I think it's still appropriate that we submit the SOI for the elementary schools. In terms of changing your second question around changing what goes in there, I think we're going to take a look at what else might we do to further articulate the need. There's been some places where we've made repairs, but maybe where are there other areas to further illustrate the need, the space, the disrepair, just the overall conditions, and make sure we're truly articulating it. Part of what we need to consider is it's not just objectively where we are as a town, but it's how we compare to other schools. We talked about that before with our submission. We just want to make sure that we're truly doing everything to illustrate the need. So take a look at that. We also discussed, I know Jen was going to go through the other submissions from this past year. Maybe there's something else there that stands out that we should include that helps to support our case. In terms of who submit, I can talk about the timeline a little bit, but we already talked about a process for who would work on it, again, within our subcommittee, taking the updated document or the new document for this year, starting to move over the previous responses, making those updates, and then there's a few places where there's specific metrics data that we need to include. So going about gathering that, and I can talk about the timeline in a little bit. And then where we stand on the solution, I think I would suggest there's 2 separate conversations. there's one, the submission to the MSBA, and then separately, how might we proceed, should we get accepted, or even if we don't, what we do about the buildings. Proceeding from an MSBA perspective, we're asking for state aid, and I think I don't see any reason why we wouldn't continue to do that. Again, for both of our elementary schools, it reduces our overall costs as a town. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't proceed that way. Anything, I tried to hit headlines, but are there specific things that you'd call out that are important?
So at our facilities working group meeting about this, we did talk about, and I said I would take it on to analyze the SOIs that were invited into the program this year, just so that we can do a deeper dive into what could be different. And Dr. Blake put in an information request, and it just came back last night, so we just got our eyes and hands on the SOIs that were invited. So just to add to that, I don't know if I should go through, if you want me to just, are we going around to answer all your questions?
I thought we could just do one question at a time.
Okay.
Sort of as a start.
So I was just going to add on to what Sasha was saying, but just to let everybody else know that we now have information on the 19 schools that were accepted in, and the details. And I told this subcommittee that I would flush those out to present to them, Benny, and what could be different if we decide to go forward. But yes, I think we should absolutely submit.
You don't have to go in a circle, but if you want to.
Just question one, should we submit?
Just question one. I mean,
Okay.
question one's probably the easiest.
Yes, we
Start it
should
easy.
submit for both schools, because we have need at both schools, and I will just further say we've had need since 2012, so.
And if you want to weigh in on the second question about anything that should be different this time, I don't know if you had, we could do question 1 and 2 together.
Oh, anything different with the SOIs?
Yeah.
I know, I echo what has been said. I think we can look and try to find ways to elaborate. I kind of think we can tap into different resources, get some more information from the people who are in the buildings all the time. And yeah, any information that Jen can bring back as well.
Jimmy, any thoughts?
I just
to
have a
weigh
question. You
in?
brought up a point about like the repairs. When we're doing those repairs on the elementary buildings, does that show where this is going? Like that we're doing these repairs? Is that like your building's like getting better, getting worse, or like what is the effect of that? Because in one hand, it's getting better, but also, okay, every year you're spending X amount of numbers on repairs, and it's not like
Yeah.
buildings
I
in
think that-
dire need. Like these
That's
are
the
major.
million-dollar
It's a good
question,
question.
Jimmy.
Great
That's a
question.
great question.
I mean, I think
And that's-
I think the roofs is a good example of that, right? The roofs are in a better condition. We didn't put 50-year or roofs on that will last 50 years, right? And so between going through this process, being accepted, getting ready to build, there'll be a place where they may need to be updated again. So yes, it's absolutely a consideration. I think it doesn't take us out of the running because we're making these repairs, and we need to be doing these things for our students that are right in the classrooms today and in the coming years. So we wouldn't, I think the second part is we wouldn't decide not to do those just to look better to the MSBA. Yeah, we want to do the right thing by the students and the teachers.
I think we need to really articulate well, we're doing sort of the emergency things that we have to do to keep, be it the heat on, solve the leaks. But that might be something that we could look at for the accepted SOIs, because I'm sure that's happened too. I mean, I looked at the dates of these schools that were built for the accepted SOIs, and they're the age of our schools, if not older, so they've been making repairs, I'm sure, too. So how did they articulate in their SOIs that we could?
In the small amount of time between last night and then leading up to it, I did a little bit of research, just not having the actual SOI, but there's a lot of recent repairs that got accepted, which is nice to see.
Yeah.
Just
that's good
for the record, that came in yesterday afternoon, I think. I just didn't get to my email till 10 o'clock last night, so. It was sent during the business day. I just didn't get to it in my email.
I'll also add, Jimmy, to your question, because I think there are two things that we want to talk about that are separate but related, and one is like the physical condition. Yeah, leaky roofs are gonna, they're bad for a building, they're bad for students, but even like the space, like a space thing is something you can't fix. So how is that impacting education? So like how all of these things, you know, which are some things you can repair, some things you can't, but how is it all impacting the education?
Awesome.
Want to go, or?
Sure. So I will also agree that we need to resubmit 1 or 2 SOIs this cycle. You know, I think to, you know, every point, there's no reason not to. You know, we've heard from we've seen with our own eyes, we know all anecdotally, we've heard from the Teachers Association that we need to do something now, that we're beyond the useful life, even with the repairs we're doing, we're just patching things together. So yes, we need to act, and we need to do something that's going to increase our chances of getting accepted into the program next year. To question 2, with, you know, what changes, you know, I really think that we need to look very hard at ourselves and say, what precluded us from getting accepted this year? So we've heard that part of it is just, it's a really competitive program. There are towns all over the Commonwealth that are in need, and we know that. But the MSBA is also smart. They know Ipswich, and they asked us over the summer, he resubmitted the same proposal that you had before. What's changed? You know, are you crazy? Are you hopeful? Or what's changed? And we told them everything that's changed. We told them the homework that we did. We had listening sessions. We had surveys. We had workshops. We had all these things. But we didn't really tackle the 2 issues, which I think were the killer of the first project, which were location and size. So I think we need to look at those 2 issues and say, what can we do to bring more people into supporting the project and not just roll the dice with the same project? So I think that's the critical piece of looking and saying, is there something we can do that makes the project more attractive to people who voted against it last time, or that we can tweak that gets rid of the divisiveness piece and is only one, yes, we want a school, or yes, we want this school, whatever that is. So I think it's not an overnight fix, and that's what's so hard, and that's probably why we haven't had a really robust conversation of it, because it's difficult. So I'm glad we're having some of that now, because I think this is our chance to get something accepted.
Okay, thanks. So I agree, we should resubmit this year. I think we should resubmit both SOIs for all the reasons everybody said. The needs haven't changed. You know, I think we would be crazy to not try to take advantage of this reimbursement from the state. In terms of what should be different this time, again, like I already said in my opening, I think we should revisit the priority categories that we check off. Not the priority school, but it's annoying because they use the same word, so it's confusing. The priority categories that we check off, so the 2 we did check off, I think we should revisit them and see if, I think there was another one, I think it's number 5. It says replacement, renovation, or modernization of school facility systems such as roofs, windows, boilers, heating and ventilation systems to increase energy conservation and decrease energy-related costs in a school facility. I think we have a good argument for that, personally. So I would like to revisit those priority categories. I would also like to have a discussion on if we're submitting 2 SOIs, what the priority school is. You know, we did put a fair amount of fixes into Winthrop, you know, not permanent, but I think a bit more into Winthrop than Doyen, so that, I think I want to have a discussion on that priority school we choose.
At least for now.
Right, yeah,
I don't know what's going to
temporary.
happen tomorrow.
And so, you know, and to what Jeff said, you know, and I'm going back to this phone call we had with the MSBA, who stressed very adamantly to us that we spend our time focusing on what's best for our town, and then applying to the MSBA to try to make that happen, instead of what's the MSBA gonna accept? What can we do to get accepted? Like, she literally said to me, don't worry about us, like, figure out what is best for your town and then apply. So I think I'd like to come at it from that, which isn't an easy answer. But I think we should be thinking in terms of that, what is best for our kids educationally, and not necessarily what's, you know, what levers do we need to pull to get the yes from the MSBA? That's all I have to say for now.
So yes, definitely resubmit. I think, like Jeff was saying, there needs to be some sort of twist. There needs to be something that is different than what was presented before. I know some of the, tried to look at as much data as I could for the schools that were accepted and what they originally submitted and then what they ended up doing, or there was some sort of difference there. But I think finding a compromise between I mean, are we talking about can we talk about that right now? The one school, two school stuff? Or are we just talking about showing that we've maybe found a compromise between the two positions, or, you know, but I think something needs to change, because this is what we submitted before we got accepted. And then they knew there was obviously something wrong because it didn't pass. And so,
No,
And I want to counter that a bit, because sorry,
I'm sorry. I shouldn't-
oh, right,
because we
right.
didn't get accepted doesn't necessarily mean we did something wrong.
No,
in
no,
my
no.
opinion.
No, not for sure.
Okay.
For sure. No, that's not what I intended at all. I'm just thinking, looking at something different, I guess.
No, and I wasn't trying to shoot you down. I do think there is that
It
instinct
worked,
of,
yeah.
well, we didn't get in, what did we do wrong, what can we
Yeah.
do better? But maybe we did everything great.
Right,
We were just up against,
right.
you know,
Schools with greater needs.
We're
schools with greater
yeah.
needs that
This
still
year.
have an open classroom design from 1920. I
Right.
don't know, we don't, so we don't want to assume that we did something wrong. Doesn't mean we can't do stuff
Right.
better.
Sorry.
No,
Speaking
go
out of turn. And I might have heard it wrong, but I just want to clarify, what we submitted last year was different than what was submitted before the last project?
Before, right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should definitely resubmit. I mean, I think that goes without saying, you know, particularly also because they've increased some of that funding as well, so. In terms of what to do differently, you know, I think what I'm hearing around here, I would echo that. I don't think I have anything fresh to share on that. But I do sort of agree, you know, that maybe we want to be careful not to really overdo it, in the sense that, you know, what has happened since COVID is everyone all of a sudden realized how substandard their buildings were, right? When you have to move air through them, you start really taking hard looks at your buildings, and I think we're now in a different environment than we were, you know, prior to COVID, with, you know, a lot of people, with the amount of people, you know, sort of looking at their buildings critically. So I'm not sure if it's anything we did wrong, or we really have to do anything drastically different. I really do think we were up against some pretty beaten down buildings. But I mean, I think it's worth thinking critically about it for sure. If something's fundamentally changed in the district as well. You know, are we taking in a lot more EL students, or do we have more kids that are in need? Those kinds of things that our facilities are getting less and less capable of, you know, dealing with.
I would like to, I've heard a couple of people mention, well, first of all, so we seem to be unanimously in favor of submitting something by April, so that's good. I've heard a couple of people talk about 1 versus 2 SOIs, so I guess I'd just like to sort of tease that out a little bit and see if we have consensus on 1 versus 2 SOIs. I mean, obviously, we submitted 2 SOIs this past time, as well as back in 2014.
Yep. And if I can, just for the sake of staging the conversation a little bit, if we submit 2 SOIs, we have to identify which SOI is the priority project. So we couldn't just submit 2 SOIs and not identify which one is the priority. You have to identify one as a priority. Whether or not you're considering a consolidation doesn't matter, but one of the 2 SOIs has to be considered the priority SOI for the district.
Yeah, the way that we've done it in the past is said they're both in great need. One had a greater need than the other, and that's how we identified it. I think we could be consistent with that. With respect to the 1 versus 2, again, I think both schools are in need. Nothing has changed since we submitted last year. I don't know why we would not submit for both. Not submitting for both would be communicating one of the schools isn't in need of repair, and I don't see that to be the case.
Yeah. I mean, my hesitation about 1 SOI is it eliminates our potential for consolidation, because if the recommendation is to, from the MSBA, is if you were interested in consolidating schools, potentially, it doesn't lock you in, but if you're interested in consolidating schools, you should submit SOIs for both schools, or all schools you're looking to consolidate. So for me, to take consolidation off the table seems foolish. So I would support submitting 2 SOIs, and I think we could have more of a discussion about which school we choose as our priority.
So a question, so if we submit both, which I agree we should do, and we say, let's just say X is the priority school, and they say, okay, so we're gonna, do they say, okay, we'll fund that X school? And then are we stuck doing the 2 separate schools?
No.
Okay, so they just say, what would they say if they accepted us?
They would say your priority school is accepted into the, you tell me.
I can
about-
add
Yeah.
what I know. So, for instance, last time Winthrop was, I actually think they didn't even use that term in process last time, but let's just say last time they chose Winthrop as the priority. The project gets named the Winthrop project. So even if it's a consolidation at a completely different site, it would be the Winthrop project. When they do the feasibility study, they would look at a bunch of scenarios that impact the population that attend X school or Winthrop school in that case. So that's why we have a lot of information about, doing all sorts of things, like rebuilding Winthrop, renovating Winthrop, a little bit less detailed information about Doyon, because that was brought in after the fact for a consolidation, but it was still, if you look up the MSBA now, like it's called the Winthrop project. Like, I'm using
Okay.
that for an example.
Okay,
So
So you'd get a-
but we could still
So
consolidate.
the
if we wanted.
project
Okay.
would, if you pick X school as your priority school, the project would have to improve conditions and create a new building for those students in X
Right.
population. It
Right.
doesn't have to be an X site.
Right.
It doesn't, it could be a school that benefits X students and Y students.
Okay, okay.
At a totally new site.
Right.
that-
But they'll do the full workup for X
That one.
students.
Okay.
Students who attend X, yeah.
Okay.
Other thoughts on 1 versus 2?
Well, I just have a question that, I'm not certain that consolidation is off the table if you only do 1. It seems that there's a should in the FAQs that you should do 2, but I don't know that it closes the door. But I also, we know that 2 are not getting accepted in the same district in the same year. Is it more work to do 2? Probably a little, maybe not a lot. So I say, yes, we should probably submit both. But I don't know that it either closes the door on either option or that somehow we're going to hit a windfall and do 2 in the same time. So I don't really think it matters. I think that the designation of a priority is important
Right.
for a number of reasons, but I don't know that. So I think we should do 2, but I don't have any objection if someone just said, let's do 1.
Does anybody think we should only submit 1 SOI?
No, but can I add to, Jeff, to your point? I think we should submit 2 for everything everybody said, but when we just got that information about the SOIs that were submitted, I had already done like a little homework, just like looking up newspaper articles, and 3 of those schools who said, no, we're not, on their SOIs indicated that they were not interested in consolidation. There's newspaper articles that quote administration saying, oh, we're going to maybe consider consolidating these schools. So I don't think that that's a risk we should take, but it is interesting that,
Well, I wonder if then you do decide on consolidation in the feasibility study, you then have to submit a belated SOI for
Right.
the second school, in which case, assuming we're keeping consolidation on the table, we might as well just do them now. All right. Okay, we have consensus on two things. This is very exciting. All right, so we're submitting, we have agreed to submit an SOI, we have agreed to submit 2 SOIs. With your timeline from the facilities group, when do you feel like we would need to decide on the priority school? If you have a thought on that.
Let me pull up the timeline, give me 1 second.
And is that timeline shared with us? Or-
No, we were going to review it tonight. I'm happy to share it right now. So
I know,
glad
I
you
think
asked.
we can bump up your subcommittee report too.
So the submission opens on the 12th, January 12th, closes on April 12th. Our goal is to have a draft to review in the full school committee by March 7th. It's our first meeting in March. We are meeting on the facility subcommittee is meeting on the 25th to pull forward all of the responses from last year into this year's form, and then to identify specifically what needs to be updated. So we'll have a good start by the 25th.
Of January?
Yep. Our hope is to walk into that meeting with everything pulled forward already. So we're making revisions, not starting with a blank form. Full discussion here, March 7th. Vote on March 21st. We'd have time to review it, incorporate feedback, comments, discussion, come back at the next meeting, and then vote on it. We need to bring it to the select board, or the select board needs to vote, not on materially what's in it, but just that we're making a submission. Our recommendation is that happens on the March 18th or April 1st meeting. We can sort out the details. Our goal is to be ready to submit by April 2nd, but it's not due till April 12th. So we wanted to include buffer time in there. So to your question about details, priority, things like that, it would need to be our recommendation is if we vote on March 21st, that it would be finalized, and we'd be making that decision then, but certainly we'd be discussing in the prior meeting on March 7th, as well as potentially leading up to it. If we felt like there was something stood out that we as a subcommittee wanted to bring forward, we would do that. We also discussed we're meeting monthly now, but we're going to need to increase the frequency of our meetings to make those updates to the documents along the way. So we'll be able to bring things to the full body, should we see anything that sort of really stands out that needs to be discussed.
So,
I rambled through the dates quickly, or I read through the dates quickly. I'll share them, make sure everyone has it, similar to how we've talked about some of the budget dates, just to make sure they're clear.
okay. So the information it seems like you would be looking at the accepted SOIs from this year to identify what might need to be added to ours, which is, I agree with. But I also think there may be other sources of data that come in that we might need to change too, like input from our facilities director on what changes have been made. I know we've talked a little bit about, do we want input from teachers? There's another one. Oh, if we switch those priority categories, if we add a new priority category like the one I just read out, number 5, are we going to need to provide a lot more detail on, roofs, windows, boilers, heating, that kind of stuff? So I think that decision, if we're going to add a new priority category, would need to be decided early.
For the first one, in terms of the updating the specific data, we said in our meeting on the 25th, we would identify what those are, so we can begin to pull that, not to have the updated numbers, but to say, these are the numbers that need to be updated. And then for those just general discussions, that's what would take place between the January 25th meeting and then bring it to this full body on March 7th.
Okay.
So does that give us, call that 6-ish weeks?
Covered
to
December.
do exactly that, as well as just the general updates to the way that we've articulated the need in the SOIs.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wonder if there may need to be a couple more dates in that timeline for like gathering data from other.
I think once we know what the data is, we would build that in.
Goes in.
Build
If we
those
need
in,
one
too.
number updated, like number of students, we're good. If we need
Right.
50, so we'll talk about that in the meeting on the 25th.
I've
Yeah, the
already
intention is to
asked
set those
for
milestones along the way.
The facilities information, so that's on its
Okay.
way.
So would it be the full committee that would, I feel like it would need to be the full committee that would decide on the priority school decision and probably the priority categories we pick.
I think we could bring a
So-
recommendation on the March 7th meeting to discuss.
I don't think we had a say in that last time. I think we followed you and your facilities. So are we saying that we want to have that's part of our vote? Time around?
I think it should be a full committee discussion.
Can I make
Yes,
a
you
suggestion
may.
or ask a question? So I agree, Kate. I'll go start with the priorities that we point out. I was looking at that priority as well, and then I read it again, and I'm like, is that saying that we are just having an issue, about sustainability and all that? Or is it saying that we're seeking to solely replace those systems? So I kind of wanted to clarify
Yeah.
what that priority was. I don't know if priority one is, if that seems like that's something we could put, or if we're not quite there. And then in terms of the priority school, I'm wondering if we can reach out to the MSBA. The way I understand the priority is we want to check off the box, because again, the way I understand is they're probably going to, I'm imagining they would filter through the priority schools first and compare what we already kind of are filtering as the school with the highest need with other schools. If they are saying, no, there's a strategy behind it or something else, then we should be aware of that. That's just my understanding, but I'd love to know what their recommendation is, how they are reviewing submissions. Do they ever accept a non-priority school over a priority school? Like, we don't really, I don't have answers to that.
Okay. So the process for this next round just opened up on Friday. I requested access to the system because it's protected, and it's typically just superintendents and business administrators that work actually within the system. So they had a webinar this morning that I got on, and there's a slide deck that they're going to send out. They haven't sent it out yet. That went along with the discussion points today. And they have made changes to the questions and the formats and the information that they're asking. So it's not, while we can pre-populate things, there are a number of changes that they're making that's going to make that more difficult. Because the other piece is that they stressed today is that they don't want redundancy. And we shared a lot of the same information because we had multiple areas. They don't want that. They were very clear. They just pointed out, we answered this in question 2, or however we want to reference it, but they don't want it. They don't want cut and paste types of things. Not saying that we did cut and paste, but just they don't.
In the
They want to
same
be very
application.
careful about. They want to be very methodical and succinct about the SOIs that they're reviewing. And there were a number of other points that I'll share with the committee once I get the slide deck in terms of how we should go about the process. My comment specifically is that we're going to have to look closely at these priority areas, and it's not, I think we should decide which are the most important priorities, because we could fit under any number of these, but what's and I think you'll see that in the SOIs that were accepted. It's not throw everything at the wall and see what will stick. We want to be succinct in the application, and I don't know, I haven't been able to see what the actual questions are that they're asking now. They've eliminated and changed some of the questions, so for the different priorities, I don't know for number 5, just because that's what we were just talking about, I don't know the answer to that and what kinds of questions they're gonna ask about the systems and what changes or upgrades we've made or are looking to make. Because we hadn't looked at that priority, so I don't even know what the questions are. I think I need to try to print out a complete blank document that we can then look at and make that decision. I don't think we're ready to make that decision tonight as far as what the priorities are that we should be looking at in 1 through 8. To the earlier question, priority 1 is replacement of a building that's structurally unsound and is a danger or otherwise in a condition seriously jeopardizing the health and safety of our school children where no alternatives exist. Well, my understanding is that one of the schools that was accepted had to be closed, and they relocated. So, so that's pretty severe, and you do have to, I know for that one, you do have to submit structural engineering reports and things like that as to why the building is, why we're saying what we're saying. So it's a lot more involved and a lot more in-depth that you have to go with the SOI submission.
And I think if we choose to pick priority 5 and not pick priority 2, it doesn't mean, I'm guessing we could still talk about overcrowding. It just might not be.
Right.
We just might not choose it as our priority, but that doesn't mean it's not something we could address in the SOI.
Hey, Jimmy.
Thanks, Jimmy. Good luck tomorrow. Okay. All right, making good progress. So I think we've sort of decided, do people feel like amenable to that timeline? And, I like that you did it and that it sort of lines up and feels like it gives us some good benchmarks to work for, gives us enough time so that we're not sort of scrambling at the last minute. But I think the sooner we could sort of answer those questions as to our priorities and the priority school. I don't want to be deciding that late in the process. Okay, so I wrote a bunch of notes. Okay, so we're on to where does this group stand in terms of consensus and individual thoughts on a best solution given all of the data we have. I'm okay to go first, if that's okay, but I don't have to. Go. Okay. All right, I'll go. So I have, there's, again, a lot of data in that drive. I have spent, I was involved in a lot of it, obviously, but I have reviewed a lot of it this past week, including the listening session data and some of the information we discussed at the school committee workshops. And I ran into something we talked about at a school committee workshop in, I believe, November 2022, where a former school committee, some of us were there, some of us are new, we agreed on 7 things unanimously that we agreed upon as that would be essential for a building project. So I guess I want to just reiterate those and see if those are sort of things that this school committee believes are important elements of a project. So those 7 things were need and urgency, number 1. Number 2 was a project that we're confident can pass as a priority. Number 3 was educational equity. Number 4 was consideration of costs. 5 was importance of a green building. 6 was a school building that becomes a hub of sort of providing community service and a community hub where we could involve the community in the building. 7 was a small feeling of community. Number 8 was a property that does not involve Article 97, which at the time we were discussing the BioLake Park site. And number 9 was, I guess it's 9 things, not 7 things. 9 things we agreed on. A priority for us was to find a project that eliminated the gray zone. So again, that was 15 months ago, but that was something that unanimously that school committee agreed on. And I don't know how other people feel, but I feel like those are still things that I think are a really important element of a project. So just to cut to the chase, I'm in favor of a consolidated elementary building on the Doyon site as the best solution for our district. It fits all of those 7 criteria I just mentioned. Thank you. And I'm also encouraged by the information that Diana pulled together about the failed votes, MSBA votes that failed at the polls. And the majority of those districts, if you look through that data, did get accepted 2 to 3 years later. I don't know if they submitted every year and it took 2 to 3 years, or if they waited 2 to 3 years and resubmitted again. But not every district has been accepted. A couple of districts built schools on their own with their own municipal funds. But I was encouraged that most of those districts did get accepted and within 2 to 3 years. So that's encouraging. The other data point that sort of resonated with me a lot was the statement from the Ipswich Educators Association, our teachers union. They put together a statement. I don't have the date of it, but you all have access to it, and it was read at a school committee meeting. And in that statement, they were adamantly in favor of a new project. They ended their statement with "something must be done." And I don't have the date of the statement, but it was, I believe, in 2022. So
Yeah, I
the
feel
end
like
of
a year
2022. So
ago-ish, yeah.
we're in 2024 now. Other sort of words from that IEA statement were they felt like it was not educationally responsible to continue as we are. And so that struck me because I think, we should be thinking educationally. And there's some things that statement outlined as being important to the teachers were health and safety, secure entrances, clean air, regulated temperatures, consistent maintenance of a building, spaces that respect student privacy. So health and safety. The next bucket important to them was innovation. They're looking for versatile spaces for innovation and inspiration and creativity and technology that's accessible. The third bucket that was important to them was community, smaller cohort sizes and smaller class sizes with clusters of teaching teams, and space for sort of partnerships with the outside community, so Open Door or YMCA. That was important to them. And then the last one was joy of learning. So adaptable spaces that meet the needs of all students, like maker spaces, meditative spaces, music labs, things like that. So those, that's what we heard from our staff as being important to them. And I think in our current buildings, even as old and dated as they are, I do think we have that sense of community at both Winthrop and Doyon. It's not ideal, but I do think we have it, and I do think we have that joy of learning. But what we don't have is that innovation and that health and safety. We've put a lot of money into security. We've done the best we could with our buildings, but we're just not achieving those things in our current buildings. And in my opinion, if we pursue 2 buildings, it's just inherently unfair and inequitable for me to build a new building for half of our elementary school population while the other flounders in in the building that they're in for 7 to 10 more years at a minimum, likely much more than that. So MSBA has been pretty clear to us that you have to identify a priority school, and that's your priority school until they're done. And then you can have another priority school. So it seems pretty clear to me that if you're doing a project with MSBA, it's not until the final stages that they would even entertain a second school. So if we're entertaining consecutive schools, again, in my mind, that just seems unfair and inequitable, and I don't support that. Which leaves us, if we want to have 2 schools, to fund one ourselves, which I also think is a not viable option because I don't think we can afford it as a community. And while I don't think we should be making decisions only about money, I think we should be looking at things educationally. I don't think the education would change in a consolidated school. I think we have teachers that are providing a great education. We rarely hear complaints about our education. We hear complaints about our buildings. So I don't think the education would change all that much in a consolidated school. I think there'd be a lot of logistics we'd need to figure out. Transportation and, lunches and the flow of that many kids through a building and entrances and design. And there's a lot to figure out, but I don't think the education would suffer. I don't think the class sizes would dramatically increase. I don't think we'd have plans to cut massive staff in a consolidated building. So I think there's a lot of fear around change and assumptions that would happen with a consolidated school, but there's lots of opportunities for public engagement and, I think we're at the beginning of a long process. So I think all those logistics can be worked out, and I think the education could even be better in a consolidated school because all the teachers would be together in the same grade, collaborating and sharing best practices, and we could work to have clusters of classrooms together in pods to get that small community feel that we've heard again and again from listening sessions. That is important. Small cohorts of kids, in sort of groups of pods or neighborhoods where they feel connected. I think we can get that in a larger school. And most importantly, I think it would be safe, clean, bright, environmentally conscious and green. And I just think we've done all we can with our buildings. And so for me, that's the best solution.
Thank you.
Can I just make a quick,
Sorry,
just
that
a
was a
quick
lot.
comment about the cost piece? I agree with what you said. The cost piece is not insignificant, and so I think the trade-offs of 2 schools versus the cost needs to be understood. If we look at the 2018 dollars, if we assume MSBA funding for a single school, the total then was 38 million. If we did redid 2 schools with
Cost to the town.
to the town, it's 38 million. If we did 2 schools with MSBA funding for one of the 2, the cost would have been 76 million. It's a $38 million difference. It's double. That's in 2018 dollars. 2024 dollars is about 20% higher, so it's about $46 million more for 2 schools. As you think about the differences, you said value of 2 schools, current locations. There's also is it $46 million worth it for those differences? That's not an insignificant amount. I think that's pretty important.
And for me, it's the timing too. So if we were able to build new schools simultaneously,
The previous assumptions were 6 years apart. So you're saying,
get them both MSBA funded.
no, just in general, the previous assumptions, not for the funding piece, just 6 years. So that's an extra 6 years that you're in before any repairs are made to the second building. To your point around the equity between the 2 schools, yeah. So I think that's pretty significant.
If I had anything else.
Do you want to continue since you Are you done? Oh, okay.
I'll go next. Sure you're going to ask me next, Brian?
Well,
So I agree, Kate. I think that, first, and I've said this before, I grew up in a town that had 7 neighborhood schools. Love neighborhood schools. To me, a neighborhood school is when every student, child, can walk to the school. So, when I'm thinking, I don't see, yes, there's a large amount of students that are near Winthrop, for sure, and they can walk. But I wouldn't consider that a neighborhood school. I feel like these are 2 schools in a very large geographical area. And for lack of a better term, they've just been called neighborhood schools. But, you have people from the Neck, and you have people from down Argila, and you have, that wouldn't consider Winthrop in
Rode a
their
bus
neighborhood.
for 5 miles to get.
In their neighborhood, yeah. So, anyway, so that to me is the difference between what I had when I was little and what is here in Ipswich. So, that being said, there is the concern of, oh gosh, one building is overwhelming to think about. And I've thought about that. And then we went to Amesbury, and and I had never thought of or considered the idea of like a pre-K to 2nd grade until, it was Amesbury, right? We went, and it had a very playful atmosphere. It was definitely catered for that age group. And they had a campus. They were detached. It was like a 3 through 5 or 3 through 6 also on that campus. And, but I would like, if I were to pick, is have 2 sides of the building, or 2 buildings, but connected by common areas, like the gym, or the CAF, or the library, or something. So they're 2 different entrances, and so they would allow, like, 2 different principals, is what I.
Like this building, kind of.
Yes.
But another.
Yes, exactly. So that atmosphere can be geared towards the little ones. And it can be cozy, and it can be, like I said, playful. And I think that's what I was talking about with a little twist, maybe that would be a kind of a compromise between people that want the smaller schools, and they would be, but they're attached in the middle, but just divided differently. And one of the things that I read many times was equity, having education be equitable, like having, the same offerings for each student, because, one school right now, they have this, and the other school, they have that. So to have it completely, everybody has access to the same services, the same, this, that, and or the field trips, that was one of the things that they were saying, is that, this school goes on this field trip, the other school doesn't. There's those differences. So having, the pre-K through 2 for all the town, or K through 2, or assuming pre-K through 2. And then the 3 to 5, I think it would unify the town, the community. People are talking about communities. You unify the community, everybody would have access and opportunities that everybody else has. And let's see what else I have. I would have to have separate roads access roads for the bus, and one for the cars, because I know that was a big thing. We know it's a big thing here. And talking to the buildings that we toured, it was amazing how they had, those separate areas for, the bus, cars, and walkers, actually. And I think that we could tour more schools and keep in touch with the contacts that we have made, because their wealth of information having gone through this, and they're happy with most of the decisions, but there's some things that they wish they could have done differently. So, but anyway, large gym was a big thing that I had read. And, you know, perhaps having a large gym with a divider, a movable divider. So, you know, you could have, remove that and have one large space for events. Space that can be modified and adjusted for the different needs, different classes, you know, the population growth. So we have room to expand. So that's it. Matt?
Passing the torch. Yeah, I mean, this has kept me awake since it really became, you know, a big hot button topic. I've been skeptical since the beginning about a one school of that size, particularly for kindergartners, first graders, you know. Most of the literature I was able to get my hands on spoke quite eloquently to the importance of smaller schools for that age group. I was worried about the effects that pulling a school out of downtown might have on the downtown. Downtown vibrancy has always been an issue, really, since malls started stripping away. And then now online starts stripping away more and more from downtowns. So those are the things that really kind of have always driven me towards two schools. Having said that, you know, I was only able to go on one of those tours, and that was to the Gloucester School, which would not be, obviously, I think it was 400, mid-400s, does that sound right? But nevertheless, I was struck by how it never felt that big, right? They managed to create a small school feel within a much larger kind of building. You know, so that kind of made me think that some of my concerns could be allayed, you know, in a bigger building. And then the big elephant in the room is funding. You know, I think we're running into big projects right now. You know, we have Whittier to talk about next. We have the public safety building. And to the points you just brought up about how expensive the two schools, I'm not sure that could be done at this point. So unfortunately, you know, despite some of my reservations about one school, I would be prepared to support one school. But I'm having trouble with some of those things that still kind of gnaw at me about the real benefits that sort of to the kids for small schools. And I'm having trouble kind of making those two work with each other, I guess.
You allowed to ask questions?
Of course you are.
Is it okay if I ask what Jenny was describing? Is that something you had thought about, or does that like make you feel any differently? Like if it was deliberately separate?
Oh,
The different ages.
yeah,
different
again, I
ages.
think I hadn't seen it in action, right, in terms of how you can structure a school to give more of that feel. You know, part of this too, keep in mind, is my own bias. I teach at a school of 1,800 kids. We never see other teachers from other departments almost ever. We don't have a building in that space where all the kids can congregate at the same time. So it lacks a culture and a feel to it. And I think I bring that anxiety to this project. And I think some of that, if not all of it, can possibly be overcome. And so I think, you know, hearing some of these ideas and seeing these schools in action does kind of make me feel a little bit better about it. But
Yeah, I think that's important. I think it's almost unfair, and maybe we do it a disservice when we talk about, is it one school, is it two schools? Because there's so many options and considerations that go into that. We talk about the schools that we've seen that have done with the schools next to each other, are they separated by floors to achieve the community, the sense of community, and maintain that from where they were before in the recently built schools, or to make sure that we're still able to keep and separate, like you're saying, younger grades, like kindergarten, first grade, so they're not there right next door to the fifth graders. Lots of things you can still do there and still accomplish. I think that's an important aspect. We're not getting into all of those, but I feel like those are important considerations that we still can get at and still do it in a single location. Yeah.
My turn.
Sure.
I feel differently. I want to start by pointing out your use of the term, Jenny, neighborhood schools. I feel like that is a term that got everybody into the weeds the first go-around with the failed vote. My issue is size and number of kids in the school. Educational data supports that elementary school kids have the best success in schools under 500. So my number is 500. I would support a school at Doyon with 500 kids, get back to the 9 priorities that we agreed on a year and a half ago, with eliminating the gray zone. I think about the non-binding ballot vote and just the new group of people that still want an in-town school. And if you made a 500-student school at Doyon, and similar to Manchester Essex and what they've done with now getting accepted with their 3rd school, I think the people who want a small school in the center of town would wait and get behind 500 school at Doyon. As far as educational equity, I think what are schools today? Schools today, especially elementary schools, are the social workers. They're the family psychologists. They're the school nurse that goes beyond just being a school nurse with Band-Aids. And the social emotional needs of children can be met in a small school, but the data says that elementary kids do best and more successful in a school under 500. And I think giving everybody the same thing and same experience in a large building takes away from educational equity, because a lot of what these kids need is the social emotional support in a small environment. And I think I would support under 500 or 500 max, and then wait and give our town an in-town school that we've just Band-Aided a few systems on. And so I just feel educational equity doesn't come from a large building. 500 is my number. The educational data supports it, and especially in elementary school kids. And that would give Ipswich, I think so many people would be behind that. And that's important to me, not to have another battle. And I think that, I was one of the people, before I was on school committee, I was one of the people fighting and standing at that microphone and talking about small schools and in-town schools. And I think there's a whole new population that are saying things that weren't said last time, but that really want to keep a school in town, that I think would be behind a plan educationally to keep 500 at Doyon. One thing I wanted to comment on when we were touring schools that was kind of a revelation to me, Winthrop and Doyon were built in the 50s and 60s for about 250 kids, and I guess Doyon was then added onto. And for the people watching at home, if you think about the footprint, you say 250 kids, okay, here's the footprint of Winthrop. If by today's standards that school was built for 250 kids, it would be this big. So to Matt's point about that school that we looked at Gloucester, that was 425 kids, that was a big building for 425 kids. So the size of today's standard school for, call it between 750 and 850 kids, is just not something that, it's just so much bigger scale. And I just can't support over 500 kids, elementary school kids, in a school.
Can I ask a follow-up question? What would, how do you envision the configuration working then? Would it be a 500 kid K-5 and a 300 kid K-5?
Yeah, ideally.
So you're, okay.
I think
Would you
one thing we-
envision, I mean, we shouldn't base our decisions on money, but we can't ignore money because we're asking the voters to pay for this. So would you envision we pay for one or we wait? And then how do we deal with the inequitable situation and the kids that have to wait for 10, 15 years and maybe forever if the vote doesn't pass?
So, you know, we as the school committee have a fiduciary responsibility to the school children and the citizens of Ipswich to provide the best education for the money. I do not believe the best education comes from a new building. And like you said earlier, we don't get a lot of complaints about the education. I don't think it's subpar. I don't think with a new building, which are, the buildings are beautiful. I loved Amesbury. I loved Gloucester. I don't think they would be getting an inequitable education based on the size of the school. I don't think so. So I also think we have, I think, different tools in our tool bag this time around, and maybe it's just my own new knowledge, but a 500 student school at Doyon, we can look at a model school. And then we could also look at a model school down the road for Winthrop. And I think there's significant savings there. And I also think it's two smaller chunks of the pie. But so to answer your question, I don't think it's a subpar education. I think it would be supported by the citizens. And it's a balance of the financial responsibility of educating the kids and giving them a quality education on what they need. And I think our kids need a small environment that supports them socially and emotionally.
Okay.
There was another point I was going to make. And I'll think of it in a second. Okay, we have another question?
Sorry. One more. I didn't mean to convey that if we did 2 consecutive schools, that the children in the second school that would have to wait would be receiving a subpar education, because I don't think they would be. We are in horribly subpar buildings and have been for decades, and I don't think anyone's getting a subpar education. So I don't think it's an education piece. It's a different, you know, it's difference in environment, safety. It's, you know, it's those sorts of things. So I just wanted to clarify that.
I'm with you on the having a smaller school, that it's nurturing. I was just thinking if we divided the school in a different way and having it be, yes, it's one connected building, but they're separate sections. You know, one with its own culture, with you know, one principal, and then the other one. So I don't know how many students are in pre-K through 2. I don't know. But I wonder if that is, it's got to be less than 500, right?
Yeah.
So that would be, you know, one section of the building that I'm thinking of. So that would be, there wouldn't be, you know, 3rd graders and 4th graders and 5th graders coming in, unless they were, you know, for the buddies system or whatever. That would be its own section. And so that would be smaller than 500. So I know what you're saying, and I like that idea, which is why I thought if we could compartmentalize these 2 sections.
You're saying like on one campus?
Yeah.
To create the separation?
Yeah.
Just different.
Thanks.
It's not,
No. And I don't, I think, the goal for tonight is to not argue and get to consensus. I think it's just sort of like a place to, I'm not saying you were arguing, I think I was arguing more than you were arguing, but I think it's a place for us to see where we are at this point in time, so,
It's a worthy discussion.
yeah.
In time, I
And
think.
it's been a long time coming, so, just thanks.
I agree, and I don't want to sound argumentative, but I asked Matt directly, and I think that's what Jenny was asking, like, with what Jenny was describing. Would that be something that you would entertain?
I don't love it. I don't love it because, and I learned this last time, and the school committee that went through all the hard work last time, K through 5 is the model that is preferred, I think, by educators, by families, and I don't like all of humanity and 800 kids, which really means over 1,000 humans in one building. Doesn't feel personal, doesn't feel social, emotional, supportive. I certainly, I think about what you said, Diana, about like take Amesbury ×2 right next to each other. The split configuration is hard for me because it feels like equity, but I feel like it's so tough on families. But what you're suggesting with the kind of connection of common space between two buildings and having kind of a split configuration of pre-K through 2, and, it's still busing every human age 5 and potentially pre-K 5 through 10 to one spot, and I just don't think that that's fair. And I think they deserve, I think about one of the people that came to the listening session last summer that had a older child that had since graduated but had a ton of sensory issues. And she point blank said, she's like, sensory children, which we all know, like, thanks to our phones and our nervous systems, like, so many elementary kids are having so many special education problems, and a lot of them are based on sensory issues. She said, my kid couldn't get off the bus. You couldn't get my kid on the bus, and you can't get off the bus when there's a building that big in front of you. 500 is my number.
All right. So I'll start by saying I think the education that our students are getting is wonderful, but like the IEA statement says, it is kind of, despite the buildings that the children in, they're working extra hard against these buildings that are not supporting the education. So I do think that the buildings are a piece in education, they're a tool in education. And right now, we're depriving 740 elementary students a wholly supported education for every day that they are in buildings that are not conducive to learning. So I really think we need to act with a sense of urgency for all of our students. As you probably know, I've thoroughly reviewed all of the data, including information from the last project, information from around the state to identify trends, and feedback that we've received from our town and our educators. And everything that I see points in one direction, and that is consolidation. And furthermore, we have reason to believe consolidation is the lower tax burden, and it is supported by a considerable amount of our voters. So I want to emphasize that I don't think we're just running away from a problem. I think we could be running towards something, which is a school that would enhance the education for all of our students. I hear the concerns if we were to make that change, but I think that we could come together and figure out how to address transportation, how to address the smallness. And I think it starts with having these conversations up front, like we learned from Amesbury and Gloucester, where they did merge schools. They talked a lot about how it had been successful because they got ahead of it. And it seemed they were happy with where they were at. See what else I had here. In terms of, again, either school waiting, like if we were having this conversation in the early 90s, maybe we would be talking about things differently. But they both have been identified as having major issues for over a decade, and we can't add like 15 more years to get to one of them. Ballot results support consolidation across all four precincts. And I think that is all I have to say about that.
Questions? So I came at this, coming in as somebody who has supported maintaining two small schools in the past. And again, looked through the list of 9 items that the school committee had agreed on last time to try to reflect those against the options that are presented now. I still think that we're a town that's divided. I look back at all of the work that the previous school committee and this committee has done and look at listening sessions, which in my review of the data appear to support continuing to have 2 small schools, survey responses that appear to be more in favor of a consolidated school. The ballot question, which showed a majority of voters supporting a consolidated school. And then I looked at, none of those are convincing enough that we have the majority, which is a supermajority that we need to fund or to pass the project. So I, again, have reservations that we're not doing enough creative thinking or problem solving or information gathering, that we're not going to find ourselves in the same place. We've modeled some of our process on Amherst, and so when Amherst had a failed project, somehow they were able to reduce the enrollment of students by reconfiguring their schools. They maybe have more flexibility than we do. And they looked at location and ultimately built on, I think it's Fore River, which was a different site than had been failed. And so we haven't been able to address, I think, what are the big issues that failed that vote last time. I also look around, and if I drive through Hamilton now, I see signs for no mega school. And I've been on the website for Hamilton, and they're using Ipswich as the case study for what we want to avoid. And I don't want to repeat that again. I also saw that Manchester and Essex was able to get accepted with an SOI this period. And they're now in the 3rd school, having created a middle school, high school with MSBA funding, a small elementary school with MSBA funding, and now another elementary school with MSBA funding. And that takes a lot of vision and commitment and trust that we're going to do right. I personally think that the educational outcome, by being patient, deliberate, thoughtful, and taking the long road, is the best decision. So I wish we had started that path 10 years ago. I wish that had happened in 2015, 16. It was prior to my time to really being involved in Ipswich. There are no rearview mirrors, so I shouldn't look back. I also have concerns about what does our growth look like. We know that we have a project that's approved by the ZBA for 191 units. It's back for 241 units. There are going to be kids in that district. That's a lot of 2-bedrooms and 3-bedroom units. Those kids are going to be our students. We also have the potential for 3A. We don't know what that's going to do, but it's going to require us to create a zone for 900 multifamily units. So there's a lot of things out there. I had reservations at a 775 student school. I have more reservations if that number goes up. With our tours that we did, Acton Boxborough chose a path that was right for them. I personally don't feel that's right for us. That school did not feel, in my opinion, warm, inviting, inclusive, a place that I think I want my kids to go. I only went to Gloucester as the other one and said, wow, I want every kid in Ipswich to go to a school that feels something like this. It was so wonderful and warm. And so my preference is find a way that we can make some sacrifices, but get everybody into that where they're going to succeed and get a nurturing, good education and something that we can be proud of.
Any other comments?
Can I just comment on some of the listening sessions and the results from the recent ballot questions? In the community survey of the 180 results that we had, 24 people mentioned a downtown school, 27, a lot of overlap, mentioned 2 schools. So it's a very small portion. Of the ballot votes from 2018, 64% were in favor of one school. Last year, it was 55%, but that's when we offered 4 questions, so you're watering that down. If we go to just yes or no, that 55 goes up significantly. There's only 19% specifically said 2 schools as they are now, as opposed to the 36th in 2018. I actually think we're shifting more towards greater consensus around single consolidated school just based on those metrics.
I think there were some flaws in our ballot question. And that was
Agree
part of,
completely.
we couldn't make what we wanted to ask within the form that the clerk could effectively do it on the ballot, and it could be read.
Sure.
There were challenges, but
I agree.
we don't know what people's second choice is or third choice, which was really what we wanted to try to pick up from that. And I think that the 2018, where you're referring to the town meeting outcome and not the ballot outcome, which was a
Yes.
simple majority a week later, which was inconsequential. But, I still fear, I personally don't know a lot of people who have said, I've changed my mind and I wish, now I want to revote and change it. And I know there are new blood, there's new considerations, including our buildings are worse, the cost is going to be more expensive, all these things. But that's a big risk for us to say, let's proceed down that path with no assurity that this is an outcome that's going to pass. And if we're going to make a decision now to pivot, I want to see it done now. If we're going to continue down that and not consider the risk of failure, we just got to know what the risk is, because it could be 5 years from now, we failed it again. And then there's no MSBA third chance, in my opinion. So, and then we're paying for a school.
I did want to say, some of the research I did with the SOIs before today when we got them, there's a school in Worcester that got invited in, it's a high school in Worcester that got invited in this time. Where it says, the school applied for MSBA project funding 13 times since 2008. In the last 7 attempts, Worcester Public Schools indicated that the school's districts, it was the highest priority. It just got accepted in. 13 times, 7 as the priority. I feel like we have to do something different than last time. And I think more research into some of these SOIs that were accepted will help us think about that.
Diana, and then I do want to wrap it up,
Oh, okay. I guess,
if that's okay.
yeah, I
Okay.
don't even have to say it if you.
You should, no, go.
That is alarming, the 13 times, and I think that, for me, is more of a reason why we do it all at once versus risking the unknown.
Well, I do like your point, and we can talk about this at our subcommittee meeting, that the schools that you found, like 10 of the elementary schools that were accepted this year, only 2 of them asked to be consolidated. The rest are, and even those 2 are 500 to 600. The rest are small schools. Those were invited in. And then to your point, 3 of them, I think you said, didn't mark off consolidation, but we'll explore that. And I think maybe we should think about prioritizing Doyon and submitting for Winthrop, prioritizing Doyon, and thinking about the size after the fact.
I think that's got to be a bigger conversation.
I mean, it used to be that we would hear, again, secondhand, thirdhand, that the MSBA was looking for bang for its buck. And that meant one school, hit that community once, be done with it. But they also could be looking at limited resources, how do we get more schools done? At the same time, instead of building a $130 million school, let's build a $50 million school or a $60 million school. We can do 19 of those instead of 13 of those this year. So if there's a back door into potential consolidation, again, not my preference, but if, is that the creativity that we sort of need to leave on the table when we're trying to present ourselves in the most favorable way?
For the two-school,
This is the
I'm
last
sorry.
comment.
Sorry,
No,
I know
go.
she was.
That's
She was. I
I'm
snapped
patting
right in
us
that.
up.
Can't go back
We gotta
now.
move on.
Is it Winthrop, is that the location that you would want to keep that school? Or would you want it to be built somewhere else, so this, do you know what I mean?
The only sites that I think have remained, at least with our old ones, were Doyon, Winthrop, and Town Hall. I don't think that we've pretty much said there was not a benefit. Bialek Park was off the table. There was no benefit to Mile Lane over Doyon. And there was a committee that looked at privately owned sites, and sort of nothing ever came up with good ideas there, to my knowledge.
Right.
All right, thank you, everybody. I know,
Poor thing.
oh my gosh, literally,
No,
okay.
it's just a future ask. At some point, Dr. Blake, like we have the IEA statement, I'm wondering from your perspective as the educational expert and kind of holding the vision of the school district, if you would share your thoughts, but it doesn't have to be right now.
At a later meeting, we will be being sure to do that.
Glad to do that.
Thank you, everybody, and as well as the patience of our audience member. I'm sorry, we are horribly behind schedule, but we are almost there. No, thank you to everybody for sharing your thoughts. I know it's been a long time coming, but it's also, it's hard when, you know, it'd be great if we all just agreed on everything, but that's not the way it is. And so I think I'm glad we're starting this conversation. There will be more to come, but I think we did agree on some things. Everybody wants to submit an SOI. I think everybody agrees with submitting 2 SOIs. We have a timeline in place, and some action items. So I think it was a productive conversation, so.
It helps fine-tune when there's different viewpoints.
Yeah,
know,
and it's good to
definitely
just sort of know
helps.
where we are,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
at this point in time. So, thank you. Okay, moving on. Whittier Tech Building Project Discussion and Potential Revote. Looks like we have a guest speaker on this, which I will recognize, but I'm just, is that correct? Yes, okay, thank you. Or are you just here at 10 o'clock for fun?
Insomnia?
Sorry. So Jenny was the one who had sort of brought this up. Is it okay if we have our guest
Of
speaker
course.
first? And then we will.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we will acknowledge you and welcome you to the microphone.
Thank you,
We know
Madam
you, but
Chair.
you may introduce yourself,
Yes.
please.
My name is Brad Hill. My address is 16 Birch Lane, Ipswich. And I saw that this issue was going to be on your agenda, so I was hoping I could come and just share some thoughts with you and some experiences that I have had in the past from my former position as your state legislator. So I thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to take a few minutes of your time.
Welcome.
Some of the concerns around town that I hope you will consider in reconsidering your vote, and if you do reconsider your vote, that you would maybe think about changing your votes from yeses to nos. And the reason I'm asking that is because of the concerns that many have in town regarding funding and the funding mechanism that is in place for funding this project. As we know, back in 1967, when this was all put together, the formula that was put into place to pay for such a project looks at your K through 12, not the amount of children that you actually send to Whittier, which then shows that we would be paying a percent of this project that is a lot higher, arguably, than it probably should be. By you folks sending a message by voting no, we would hope, some of us in town, that the message would be sent to Whittier that we need to take a step back and reconsider not only the project, but the funding mechanism that is in place. When I was on the Board of Selectmen here in Ipswich, I would never have voted for any project without knowing how I was going to pay for it. I had to go before town meeting, as you all have to, with your budgets or with a school project, and you have to tell us how we're going to pay for that. There is nothing in place, Madam Chair, that would tell us how we are going to pay for this. Are we just going to vote yes, as the communities will in a week, and then decide how we're going to pay for it? Is it going to be through a Prop 2.5 override? Is it that we're going to have to cut your budget or the community's budget? So there's a concern about, one, how we are going to pay for this project. My experience with North Shore Tech, our tech school over in Middleton, was very similar to what's going on now, and I want to share with you some things that I don't see happening that happened then. And one of the biggest issues was the communication piece between the North Shore School and Essex Aggie, so let me not forget Essex Aggie was part of this project. And it's not apples to apples. I'm going to admit that to you because the land was state-owned, formerly county-owned. But we were able to put together a committee of people, not school committees, but a different committee of leaders of our community. So our town managers, for example, Wayne Marquis, who is no longer with us, was the Danvers town manager. He was the chair of this committee. Not only did we have leaders of the community, we had leaders of the school, and we had legislators involved, where we were able to work together to come up with a special act to help pay for that project. These are the type of discussions that I don't think have happened. I don't know. Which brings me to another issue. The fact that the yes people of Whittier have been sending us all these mailings that we have actually gotten out into the communities and gotten the information out to you. Let me remind all of you, the school committees, the boards of selectmen, the mayors change on a regular basis. Newburyport has a new mayor, brand spanking new. This is his first year. This supposedly has been happening since 2015. All we have to do is look here at this school committee, who was here since 2015. Who was here since 2018? And if you look at our Board of Selectmen, we actually have 4 new members in the last 2 years. So any information that may have come forward in 2015 or 2016 was dropped by the wayside, in my opinion, because we have new people involved. And that's why this creation of a committee should have happened, and I don't believe it has happened. The last thing I will say, I could go on for an hour, and I'm not going to do that. But the last thing I will say to you, Madam Chair, and through you to your committee, is that I have heard, and that's why I'm here personally, to see you face to face and talk to you, is that people are concerned that by voting no, that people at SBAB are going to look at your vote and not give you a project here in Ipswich. And I'm here to emphatically tell you that is not true. That is not going to happen. When I was in the state legislature, we revamped the SBAB so that we took politics out of projects. Back when I first started, if you can believe it, there was a list this long They had like 50 to 75 projects on it. We had to fund the list through the legislature. And let's pretend that Ipswich was number 50. And I was such a great legislator that I was able to convince the SBAB, can you move it up to number 25? It happened all the time. That does not happen anymore. We took politics out of it. We gave it 1 cent of the sales tax to help pay for it. Once in a while, we will, shift a little bit of money through the budget toward it, but for the most part, it's that 1 cent through the sales tax. And as you know, we go to the SBAB, we advocate for you, and we hope to get the projects done. How you vote for Whittier or not for Whittier will have absolutely no bearing on what happens for the Ipswich project moving forward. I would be shocked, and I would be the first to go public and say how wrong that is. So if you're worried about that, let me lay your fears to rest. That's not going to happen. They're going to vote yes or no on the merits of the project, as they did a few years ago when we all worked together, we all went and advocated at the hearing to get that to happen. You talked about Hamilton Wenham. I was involved over there. The two communities, they're regional schools, right? You have two communities of leaders working together to get that school project done. I actually worked on the high school in Manchester, Essex, and I was very involved with the elementary school in Manchester. Once again, it's a regional school district. How did they complete and get this thing done? They put a committee together, and they all worked on a regular basis. The committee that I talked about with North Shore Tech, they met weekly and monthly to let leaders of our communities know what was going on during construction, after construction. That's what should be happening, Madam Chair, is we should be stepping back, looking at the 1967 agreement, because it's not fair. It is not fair. It's inequitable for all the smaller communities. But I would argue to you, Madam Chair, I should have a chance to go to town meeting and vote how I will pay for this before we say yes or no. I will end it at that, Madam Chair, because I appreciate you allowing me this opportunity. And I hope that the committee votes to reconsider the vote from last week, and I would ask that you vote no. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
Okay, so this was, so we did vote at our last meeting, and this was a request of a committee member who attended the tour, the public tour at Whittier on Saturday, and asked to bring the sort of feedback from that tour back to our committee and consider a revote and have a discussion. So I'll turn it over to Jenny.
Yes, I attended the tour on Saturday, and it was clear, it's clear that the building needs help. Many issues with the building, for sure. When, there's leaks, there's, not enough space, but then I'm thinking, that sounds awfully familiar. That's what we're dealing with, those things in town, more so. It just didn't seem that the issues that they were pointing out necessitated a new facility. I'm a layman in terms of, the engineering and, all of those things, but the things that they had pointed out on my tour, I'm thinking about, Winthrop has, barrels down the hallway for leaks. We have a trailer next to Winthrop for overcrowding, and so I walked in and I was just not, I don't say not impressed. It's a great school. Definitely things wrong with it, but it made me reconsider saying, is this really, these issues worth building a $444 million, new facility. And even though there's, the MSBA help, it just didn't make any sense. And then I learned that the code violations, or the code, things that they'll have to upgrade to code, there's no deadline on those. There's no, this has to be done by a certain time. There's no, this repair needs to be made. And so I was thinking, well, gosh, if there's a code violation, that's got to be, a quick turnaround. But I've learned that there's no deadline to those. And all of those things would have to be voted on by the entire district, all the district communities, before they would go ahead and make any capital improvements and things. So hold a no vote right now is not this is what I found, is not $100 million more than saying yes, because we haven't, it's up to us to approve those things that are coming up, and there's no deadline for them. So it's not automatically we say no, and then it's going to cost $100 million more, as I was led to believe, because that's what I was saying to you, Sasha, and I was saying to you, Jen, I was like, it's going to be $100 million more if we say no, because that's what's been communicated, and that's what's been out there. And I hear code violations, and I'm like this. So I had to take a step back and be humbled. And it just doesn't, I just decided I have to change my vote because it's not what what we were all being led to believe, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm also concerned about that and the communication that's been non-existent, as Jeff had pointed out, as we all know. And so for those reasons, I cannot support this project, and I wish I had this information and the tour prior to the first vote, but here we are. And so I'm changing my vote to a no.
It would need to be, somebody would have, whoever made the, if you decide
Oh,
to
okay.
revote,
Because we took a vote.
first order, right, so whoever
True.
made that original motion to support that project would need to offer a motion to reconsider and then second it, and then vote on that, and then reopen discussion on whatever motion came forward after that. So, I'm not sure who made the original motion to support the Whittier project at the last, was it the last meeting that we did that?
Helping me, I was looking it up, but. I don't have those notes.
Oh, okay.
Maybe it was me.
Can anyone make a motion to
Does this have to be the same person?
I think I don't know that it's legal that it has to be the person that made the motion, but it would be stronger if it were. And correct me on parliamentary procedure if I'm wrong.
I was under the understanding of somebody who was a yes vote could make the motion. Now you're making me question that.
I think I made the motion, but are we going to discuss about,
Yes, we can,
does that need to come first, or do we discuss if we want to?
I think the first order of business is, do we want to entertain a potential reconsideration of that vote from last week?
We're going to have that discussion first?
Yes, on that issue.
Okay.
Do you have a comment on that?
Not particularly. I don't feel strongly either way, so if the
I could-
majority would like to, then,
Similar to what you brought up, Jenny, in the Finance Committee and the Select Board meeting. They've discussed it since we met last. I think there was a lot that they brought up, to your point of information originally presented, I think first at the Tri-Board and subsequent meetings, my words, felt wildly misleading. I even asked the question last time, right, of if it doesn't get funded, don't that we immediately go into trigger senses like sprinklers and things like that, which when I went back to look at it, said, yes, we immediately would need to do those things. We now understand is not the case. I think, I'll say also personally now that better understanding of some of that information and that misinformation, and I appreciate just in general the comments and discussion tonight, I think it's appropriate we discuss and consider revoting.
I just looked it up. Under Robert's Rules of Order newly revised, the motion must be made within a limited time after the action on the original motion, either on the same day or in the case of a multi-day session, such as a convention on the next day within the session. So I'm not sure that we can revote this.
We can revote.
We can reconsider a vote, because I know we voted on warrant articles and then it comes up later. We can reconsider.
This is our next session.
The Select Board has done that.
We have reconsidered, or other boards have reconsidered
just-
votes after. Because remember that, we voted on the warrant hearing. We were the first ones to vote, and then,
They revoked it.
and then all kinds of meetings happened, so we learned a lot more information, and
Right.
we were able to reconsider some warrant article votes, so it's possible.
I'm also not sure that the formal vote is what matters, right? I mean, I think it's about maybe clearing the record and stating that for new information that somebody's learned, they're no longer in support of the position and will be voting no.
Right.
It's
True.
just as effective of us having a vote. I think you just want to see to
Agreed.
people who are watching or, may read an online article or something that you're not supporting the position that's.
Well, I might not be alone, but I don't know. I think that if we're able to get a formal revote, that would have more weight.
Penalty for not following Robert's rules. I mean,
No, it's,
do it, right? I mean,
I got it. It's somebody from the winning side can make the motion to reconsider.
That's what I'm getting.
Yeah.
Yeah. But at any, I see that, but
Oh, the
At
time.
any-
Let me look at that. I'm
I
not
think
very-
there's a time,
How would that be different than the ones we voted for the warrant article?
I'm not,
You're just the messenger.
I think the bigger question
I'm
is,
just
do
looking
do
at
we have
what's
more interest among the committee
here because
of
it's
reconsidering
being
our vote
questioned.
from 2 weeks ago?
Yes, I agree with Sasha. I'm interested in reconsidering my vote.
Yeah, I certainly felt 2 weeks ago that, I was operating on the assumption that what Whittier had told us was in fact true, which is there is this sort of automatic triggering effect that if we didn't do this, we might be saddled with even greater costs for what I would consider to be a substandard process, maybe in a substandard building, right? I mean, teaching in a school while you're redoing the school is just awful, But it seems like in those 2 weeks, we are learning a little bit more about what is and what is not likely or possible to happen. I still think Whittier probably needs a new building, but per, what Brad said, I think there are better ways of doing that. One that require more consensus building. This binary choice of take it or leave it just doesn't really sit very well with me. But I was operating from a position of somewhat fear last week that if we didn't do it, that we were getting something worse for more money.
Right.
And I'm not so sure that's actually the case anymore, although there is a risk there.
So I will risk breaking protocol.
Well,
Oh, wait.
there is it has to be, everybody else can convert. It says you can only make the motion on the same day or if the meetings take place over a period of more than 1 day, like on that topic. So it said,
We're still talking about it, though. We're still talking about the topic.
By and large, however, the things for you to keep in mind is that if you change your mind after the meeting is over, in the usual situation, you can forget about the motion to reconsider. It will be too late to make such a motion. Yeah. But I'm happy to talk.
I think that's what I said before.
Telephone.
How did they do a revote for the,
They apparently didn't follow the rules.
The more you know.
But, okay, so,
Maybe not to get stuck in the governance of it, I'll also vocally say that, would I be revoting? I would be voting no.
I mean,
You don't have to.
you don't have to
No,
get
there's
position,
no-
'cause we're
right,
not voting.
right.
If
There's
anyone
no
would like to
motion.
say anything
Right,
else
make sure I stated that.
on further this.
If we're not
dis-
going to vote, that I'm on
not
record.
officially, we can't officially revote, but
Whereas, yeah, based on new information, that's how I.
Yeah, hypothetically, theoretically, if we were to revote, I would be changing my vote to no.
I'm not going to weigh in on that, but what I will say is, and I have questions about it, but no, it's not, and I did know this in general, that if the bigger vote fails, no, it doesn't automatically go to a complete code upgrade. Like, that would be something that would be voted on. However, there is the ADA piece that, anybody who knows better can correct me if I'm wrong, but if a project that they deem needs to be done sooner versus later goes over a certain threshold, then that kicks them into doing all the projects. So it could be at a high price tag.
But it could be spread over time, potentially.
It has to be under a certain amount every 3 years, I believe.
There are limitations
Yeah.
to that.
That's based on what in researching our last project, so
Okay.
if that holds true for this.
I will re-recognize our guest for just a quick question,
Yep.
and then we'll move on.
So I guess the question would be to Dr. Blake. Because I don't see, because I'm reading Whittier Tech Building discussion and a potential revote, would I not be reading that as one of your school committee members could make a motion that based on new information, I move that we not support the Whittier project? As put on this paper was a project discussion and a potential revote. It does not say reconsideration. So I would argue maybe that one of your members could make a motion not to support the Whittier project. Am I accurate in that or not?
So it would be a new motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
A new motion to not support, as opposed to the prior motion that was to support.
Instead of reconsidering our prior vote, we're just voting again.
I do think that Mr. Hill has a point.
I don't
Not
understand.
a reconsideration. It is on our agenda as a potential revote.
It's a
It's not
revote.
a
So we're
reconsideration
voting
of
again.
a prior
We're
vote.
not.
It's another vote.
Does anyone,
Maybe that's the way that we've changed votes in the past on warrant articles, et cetera, is because they're revotes as opposed to
considering a
reconsideration.
prior vote? Semantics, but it makes sense.
Good agenda.
Anyone have any further comments before we consider a motion?
I think it would also give us time to work on the contract. Figure out, get lawyers or attorneys, whatever we can to figure out how we can get out of this contract from 1967. Taking the, driving there with my husband, and it was a long drive. It's a long commute, That was another thing we were almost there, and I'm like, this is long for these students to go. And I think the first bus, I think the only bus that leaves out of Ipswich, John Muldoon told me, was 6:05 in the morning. So to get more students to go there from Ipswich, it's hard sell. You know? So I think that, a no vote will not lock us in to paying for a new building, and it will allow us time to get out of that.
Thanks. I appreciate the conversation and the guest visitor perspective. I did watch the FinCom meeting last week, and the report, about halfway through, one of their members came back from the meeting that was at the middle school in Newburyport. That was not put on by Whittier, it was put on by Newburyport officials. And that, the discussion at that FinCom meeting was good and substantial. And I do agree that a no vote, not tonight, but a no vote from, on the whole project will allow for a pause to potentially relook at that contract. It does seem like there is a lot of momentum among these smaller communities, and the town manager has, expressed that there are, he said, essentially daily conversations about this among town managers and state legislators at, from multiple communities on this. So there is sort of a lot of action happening around this. And I also agree with, the concern that the sequence of funding is backwards. We're approving a project that we don't know how to pay for, and that does really put us in a position of, having to potentially pass an override or, substantially digging into our budgets. And I think last week when we voted, I was thinking of things as I usually do and as we should from an educational lens. However, I don't want to only look through things from an educational lens, because just like for the school building project, we have to consider costs and impacts and all that too. So I think we have to look at things through an educational lens, but we also have to keep the bigger picture in mind too. So those are concerns that I also share. Would you like to make a motion?
Sure, yes. I'm making a motion to revote on the Whittier School Building, the new school building project. Is that right?
No, I would just vote to
Vote to not
not support.
Oh, okay, so we already decided that we were going to
Whole
vote.
whole new motion.
Oh, fine.
Just go right to the.
Okay. I motion to vote no on the Whittier School project. What?
The Whittier School question,
Project. What?
question that's before us, that's what you're going to be voting yes or no. But the question that's before the public for
Right.
a vote.
It's the question, not the question on the ballot, whether we're moving forward to support that. And what you're suggesting is that we don't support it. So it's
Right, so to not support the
the question.
question.
Yep.
That didn't go well.
Second.
All right, motion by Jenny, second by Jeff. Further discussion on this?
For clarification purposes, I'm going to ask that you, I don't know that I can do this, but I'm just going to say it. No, based on new information.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Right, so,
Yeah, so-
because the discussion here tonight to
Right.
re-vote is based on
New
information that was not clear or available to members
right,
prior to, so I
Right.
just want to be.
yeah. New information was based on.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the table. Any other discussion on this? So the vote is to not support the motion on the table is to not support the Whittier project question on the ballot, based on new information. All in,
Kate,
yes,
I am going to vote to abstain because I'm not ready to change from no necessarily, but I would like time to dig deeper into more of the information. So I'm going to abstain tonight.
All in favor?
All in favor of voting no? Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All in, yep, any opposed?
All
Sorry,
opposed.
I'm struggling tonight. I'm in fifth hour of meetings. I'm opposed and abstain. I'm also going to abstain on this one. Okay, thanks, Jenny.
5-2, the motion
5-2, the motion
Passes.
passes.
5 to
not
0.
support.
5 to 0 to 2.
502, yes, I'm sorry. Not support the question. Okay.
Okay, sorry, that was not our finest hour, school committee, sorry. I didn't help anything, but
Never do a motion.
thank you. I think homework is read Robert's rules.
Diana pulling out the book, though, however.
That was,
With things underlined.
Oh, my
Oh,
gosh.
Diana.
Hearts and smiley faces.
All right. Given the hour, we are going to move on to calendar review. This should take 2 minutes. I think the plan was just to just solidify that we're all solid on the budget, upcoming dates, key events. I reiterated that the tri-board meeting has been nailed down for February 28th. Any questions on this? Was it clear, sort of who needs to be where, when? It's a lot of meetings. Were we going to revisit did you have questions on, I noticed the school calendar was in the folder too. Were there questions about that we're revisiting too? You wasn't sure, okay.
Absolutely.
So let me just double check. Oh, I did want to take the opportunity for anyone who's still listening at home. The dates for the public to sort of be involved in our budget process. The key dates for those, for the public to be involved is the draft budget will be posted on our website by the end of this month. And I know we announced this at the beginning of the meeting, but the public is welcome to come to and encouraged to come to the principal presentations on January 31st and February 1st here at our meetings. There's a public hearing on the budget on February 8th, and then further opportunities to learn more about not only school budget, but town budget at the tri-board meeting on the 28th. And finally, the presentations to the Finance Committee, our presentations to the Finance Committee with the administrators on March 5th and 6th. So a lot of opportunities for the public to get involved between now and the first week in March. And I also wanted to just stress to this committee, again, I mentioned that tight turnaround time from when the full committee gets the budget and we hear the presentations. So I just want to encourage everyone on this committee to dig into the budget when you get it. It's not just the budget subcommittee's responsibility. It's everybody's. This is one of the biggest responsibilities we have as a school committee. So I want everyone to make sure they sort of dig in, email budget subcommittee or Tom with questions. We want everyone to understand it. And, we ultimately need to be prepared to present it to the Finance Committee and ultimately the voters at town meeting. So that's sort of everybody's responsibility. And the budget can be confusing for new members, so definitely ask questions as needed.
Maybe one of the things I'll suggest as we send out the budget to the full committee is an exec summary or highlights, a little bit of a guide of here's key considerations for the full group as they're going through it. It's a lot, it can be complex. I think that might just be a helpful starting point, especially for as many new people as we have.
Are you suggesting the budget subcommittee
I
come
think the
up with
budget
something
subcommittee
like
could
that?
put that together pretty quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, as part of our initial review before it goes to the full group. I think we could do that probably in the meeting.
Okay, that's a good idea?
I'll take that one.
Okay. You'll take that on?
Happy to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's great in those principal presentations if we come with questions, and they don't have to be, it can just be, I don't understand why this number went up so much or why this number went down so much. I mean, they are prepared to answer these questions, maybe not that night, but they can certainly get information and bring it back to us. Right, policy review and approval.
Who's excited?
Diana.
All right. I'm going to go through them in the order that they are in the folders. So just stop me if we get to anything that you want to talk about. So KCB, this one was, we were potentially looking at removing it, but we decided to keep it as a reference point.
Bless you.
Next, KCD, minor rewording. We looked at the amount of 500, and Dr. Blake felt that that was an appropriate amount to keep for us to consider, or if it's lower, then he can manage that. KDB, minor rewording.
I'm sorry, real quick, can you clarify the kept separate from the general fund?
Is this what we were just talking about, gifts that get submitted to?
Which policy are we on? I'm sorry, I'm just
Second
getting
one.
into.
KCD, it says gifts of 500 more will be accepted by the school, by vote of the school committee, kept separate from the general fund. I just want to clarify what,
They go into a revolving account. It's not in
Oh,
the,
okay.
in the appropriated
you.
budget.
School has
Yep.
its
No,
own
I just-
revolving
yeah.
gift account, yeah.
Yep.
can we
And we vote on that in the consent agenda, so usually those gifts.
suggest we say in a revolving account instead of kept separate from?
No, because it's not necessarily always a revolving fund. It'll always be in the consent agenda where it's going to.
Okay, okay.
How about
So,
handled as a separate account,
I'm fine with that.
separate from the
That-
general fund?
That's okay. That's right, because now it's now there's going to be the same place. Okay. I'm good, thank you.
KDB, minor rewording. KDD, we just clarified the process around who speaks as the spokesperson for each school as needed. You have a question?
No, I just, okay.
Right. KE, minor rewording and reformatting. KHA, minor rewording and reformatting. KHB, very minor rewording. KI, minor rewording. KLG, KLJ, and KLK mostly remain the same, updated the references. EFC, we updated to reflect the Universal Free School Meal Program. And EFD is the same. EHB is new. KDC, actually, that's my
Which one's new?
EHB. This came from MASC. It refers to public records.
Sorry, yeah.
KDC, that's my error. I shouldn't have put that in there. That was a policy we looked at but decided not to adopt because it did not apply. KDCB is a new policy recommended by the MASC, and there was a minor practice change that has already been incorporated, which was turning comments off of all district social media pages.
Questions on these policy revisions? So I would entertain a motion to accept,
One-
Oh,
One
yeah.
question on KI, visitors to the school. Request be made 48 hours in advance. How's that communicated? Is that in the handbooks? How are families aware of that?
This, seems kind of loose, like we request 48 hours in advance.
Not sure what the question is.
We're-
If-
Outside of this policy, how is that communicated to parents to know they should be making requests 48 hours in advance?
Doesn't seem like that's for, volunteering or parent-teacher conferences. That's like, I want to come in and watch
The teacher.
my teacher or observe the class for an hour. Those sorts of requests is what it seems like.
Mhm.
Okay, so you're still asking, how do you?
Still same question, yeah.
it-
How would any parent,
Yeah.
yeah, where's that go? Is it in a handbook?
Or if they call, like,
Yeah,
I mean, is this a high-frequency situation that you're
No.
in? Okay, so if somebody calls, like,
Right.
you would
Just
say,
set up
we
a
will
time
arrange
Verbally.
that.
for 2 days
Yeah.
later.
I mean, it's not,
Handling
it's
in
not
rural situations.
automatically, it's
Not on
not
demand.
something that we
Yeah, you can't
have
just say, okay, come in 2 hours.
in the handbooks or anything like that, no. It would be a conversation with the principal.
That was my only question, thank you.
So the one in this list that's not is KDC, so we could make a motion to approve all of these policies with the exception of KDC.
Yes. And actually, I had one question that I actually forgot myself. KHA, I had a note about book fairs, and if we felt that, if that applied to this policy, if it didn't. So I apologize if anybody pull that up and see how that reads to them.
You're curious if this applies to book fairs?
Yeah,
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
okay. I'm fine with it not applying to it, but I'm just like, what in the wording makes it clear that it's, like, that is okay to keep happening, or do we need to change
So-
anything?
In black, under the red, following these guideline statements, the superintendent and principals may permit occasional commercial or fundraising activities related to the objectives of the schools, with the following exceptions.
Okay, perfect. Mm. Like, I guess I'm wondering, do we need to
Go ahead.
give permission? Is what it, or am I reading that differently?
Go through the principal, which book fairs do.
Because then
Motion?
it says that. It says that an
Was that-
exception.
I
2
don't
hours?
think
Sorry.
that this applies to book fairs. Scholastic or, we currently are doing one with a private bookstore, not Scholastic this year. I don't think it,
Is soliciting students? It's the,
I see it as we're making the book fair available to families in the school.
It also starts with place limits on, not explicitly prohibits, so that could be your leeway, unless you're looking to prohibit it.
My read, if for whatever it's worth, would be that a book fair would not be a solicitation, by the public. The very definition of that, to me, it's like, the book fair is is part and parcel of the school culture. It's not only invited, but it's part of what happens every year. To me, the purpose and even the background for this type of activity is to prevent someone from saying, well, it's a public building, I should have access to sell something I'm raising money for, even a good cause, Little League, or even something good. They don't necessarily have access to the building because they're members of the public. It's not supporting a school purpose. That's would be my 2 cents, unsolicited.
Thank you.
I'm not taking a stance against book fairs. I just wanted to make sure
no
we were
pun
like
intended.
covered, you know, that it didn't contradict anything we were doing, so, okay. Thank you.
We have a motion.
May I have a motion?
Please.
Motion to approve policy revisions as presented,
With the exception of,
with the exception of K,
B.
D, C.
Second.
Moved by Jeff, second by Jen. All in favor? Superintendent's administrative report.
well, it's been a long time since we met last. No, I'll be fast. It's been a busy couple of weeks, between weather issues and all that going on. We're in the process of putting the budget together, as I spoke about earlier. I'll just be very quick, some of the things that have been going on the last couple of weeks, my monthly athletic update. We had the Athletic Advisory Committee as well. I met with the IEA for both our monthly meeting and to discuss a pay issue regarding a staff member. Admin meetings focused on budget development, hiring practices, our snow policy and closings, and professional development. Comprehensive Health and PE Compass Group, I reported on earlier. Subcommittees that you're going to get to hear yet is FEFI's Policy, School Facilities, Communication, and Budget Subcommittees. They've all met over the last 2 weeks. We also had the Ipswich Aware meeting. Participated in a 3-session, I'm in the middle of participating in a 3-session series on negotiations run by the MASS and Legal Counsel. I'll be scheduling an executive session in the next couple of weeks to review that, because I think there's some information that the school committee needs as we gear up for that, as well as preparing our positions. I also viewed a safety webinar on window coatings as school safety measures. I spent considerable conversation and time working with Dr. Hedgedis, Tom, and state officials regarding placement for one of our students. Working with the town administrator, Stephen Crane, around the ESCO project. And we should be getting a final recommendation from them. We've been working with several different options that we're looking at as potential projects, and so they're putting together a sort of a good, better, best type package for us to review, so I'll be providing more information on that in the future. I talked about, I attended a webinar. There were 107 people on the call between superintendents, finance directors, and people from the MSBA. They reviewed the timeline and some of the changes that they've made for both the accelerated repair program and the core program. So I'll have more information on that to share with the full school committee once I get the slide deck from that meeting. And then tomorrow afternoon, I'm meeting with the administrators to collectively discuss some budget reductions that we need before I can finalize my budget to present to the school committee in a couple of weeks. So, busy time of year.
Questions for Dr. Blake? Subcommittee reports. I think budget we sort of reported on already. We met.
Facilities met, I talked about the timeline for the SOI. The only other piece, we talked about a couple of the repairs in the school building, which we've talked about here already, so I don't need to recover.
Communications.
Yes, I do. I'm sorry, can we go back 1 second? Question for Dr. Blake. Is there any new information about the leaking situation in this building?
The leaking
is
situation
there
in this building?
Yeah.
No, at this point, we haven't had any more leaks. Those rooms, the pipes have been isolated. We don't have heat in some of those rooms, and so we've been moving people around in the building, keeping doors open, adjoining classroom doors, et cetera. And parts have been ordered, and I hope to somehow accomplish all the repairs at once, meaning either a Saturday or having to potentially close school for a day. But that's yet to be determined.
And the timeline's still depending on the
As soon as
parts?
the parts all come in, because they had to order 7 sets of valves and things that go in the it was all the same issue. I'm not using the right word, it's not coming to me, but the right parts in the Univent systems all have to be replaced.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to ask about that. Sorry for jumping off topic for a minute there. It's late. Communications, our newsletter is in the folder. And there were a couple comments, so look at those real quick. I'm not sure if the wording on the first sentence of the Whittier representative piece makes that more clear, or if anybody wants to suggest a different tweak.
Like apply to serve.
I'm sorry, I can't hear either of you.
I like, Diana asked about the
Yeah.
the strong AC that's running in here right now. About the Whittier representative line, and if we wanted to change the wording, and I said, I like apply to serve on the Whittier vocational school
I
committee.
just said an opening instead of a vacancy, but either one's fine with me.
All right, I'm just going to accept it unless anybody has anything else to say. All right, and then,
Do you have a comment, Jenny?
go ahead.
About I haven't pulled it up yet, sorry. Does it say, can we add anything about our new vote? Whittier?
It's sort of
We don't need to.
a separate topic.
This will go, we talked about that in
Oh, right.
Communications Subcommittee. This goes out after the town-wide vote, and so we felt
Oh,
like
okay.
we'd be reporting
Okay.
on something
Oh, okay.
after the fact.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're
Gotcha.
hoping
And no matter how the
this
vote
gets-
goes, it's still an opening that needs to be filled on the school committee, whether or not they proceed with that building.
Thank you.
All right, so,
And it's provided a little clarification on budget dates.
okay, so clear those up. Yeah, and then the only thing, I don't know if you're looking at this, Laura, but we can coordinate about when that budget goes online, just incorporating that link, so we'll chat. Okay. I think we talked about the February 8th. All right.
Sorry, there's a note it was added to the budget section at the very end. The draft budget is here.
Yep,
We
that's
have
going
the
to be.
draft budget to publish by the time this goes out?
Yes, because it's going out on the 30th, and that's expected to be on the,
Yeah, so she was
30th?
just gonna, I think you just
Yeah.
said she was just gonna coordinate with Laura to make sure we don't say something that's not gonna happen, but that's the anticipated date is the 30th, which is the date this newsletter goes out, so.
Right.
Yeah, if the newsletter comes out at 9 AM and the budget comes out at 4 PM, we might wanna not say,
yeah.
we can't provide a link, but we'll, yeah.
Thank you. We'll figure it out. Okay. So, okay, so newsletter's good.
Yeah, I think it looks great.
And then I have a little request to make as a school committee. Usually I try to put the visuals for social media up here, but obviously we had a lot to prepare for this meeting, and I did not get time to do those little clippets. I typically just do the headline and a little picture if everybody's okay with me having a little free reign there. All right, thank you all.
Yeah, because you just pull content from the
It's
newsletter. Yep.
completely the same content, just with a little picture. Yep.
If you want a second set of eyes, feel free to send them to me, but I don't need to
Okay,
see
will
them.
do.
Where could they find more information about the Whittier position, the appointment? To know what it will entail and the time commitment and how often they have to drive to Haverhill and,
There is a information on the Whittier, I don't have the exact link, but I could probably find it. There is some information on the Whittier Tech website.
is that something that we would lead them to for this, or?
We could link the
I guess they could
school committee
search it for
website.
themselves, but.
Yeah,
Yeah, I could try to find the school committee
I mean,
page and link it to you.
yeah, I can put it in right
If you
now.
want, I don't think. I can try to find the link.
You think on through social media?
Or just
Well,
on
in
this
our-
the
in the-
newsletter.
In the newsletter, I think the
Yeah.
comment is, in the newsletter, should we have more information about what that opening?
Oh, the opening, I'm
Else.
sorry, I misheard you. I thought
opening
you meant
for
I thought you meant the building project. I misheard you, got it. Yeah.
All right, I just put that to their homepage unless you want more.
I'll look for a more detailed,
Okay,
school committee does have a page. I don't know how informative it is, but I will look.
yeah.
And we'll only add the link if it's gonna
Yeah, it doesn't
add some more
actually seem
information.
present. Yeah.
We good for communications, or we have more?
You want to mention do we have a tri-board meeting?
That's, I think our next
that in the past?
newsletter would come out,
27th or 28th?
our next newsletter would come out the 27th, and then that meeting's the 28th.
Okay.
So it could
Then we
go in
could
the
take,
next.
then we can take off that February 29th one, right?
Oh. Yes.
Yeah, I'm deleting it. No, I'm good.
We good for communications?
Feel good about
Any
it?
other subcommittees have reports? Working groups, liaisons?
Jeff, do you need any other feedback or anything on the,
I think we just need to set a date that we're going to meet next.
Okay.
I think Nat had asked us about that, so maybe we can look at calendars tomorrow.
okay.
New business? Vouchers and bills are all set. Consent agenda. Move the Ipswich School Committee to accept the meeting minutes from December 7th, 2023.
Moved.
Second?
Okay, any discussion or comments on those minutes? All in favor? Unanimous. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Diana, second by Sasha? All in favor? Thank you. All right, thank you. Thank you, good night.
Good night, Ipswich.